Chapter 1626, Mana Weapon. Chapter 1626, Mana Weapon. Chapter 1626, Mana Weapon. Expendable type weapons and equipment didn't function like their common type counterparts. Common type weapons and equipment were designed with both power and stability in mind. Hence, they'd only exert a certain extent of the power of the materials used to create them, nothing more. Meanwhile, expendable type weapons and equipment were only designed with power in mind. These weapons and equipment functioned at the expense of the production materials, which meant that they couldn't be repaired. However, this was also why they were extraordinarily powerful, allowing their users to challenge foes of a higher tier. Mana weapons were the typical representation of expendable type weapons and equipment. As Shifeng gazed at the mana weapons in the hall, he was at a loss for words. Expendable type weapons and equipment's production had ceased long ago in God's domain, and any discovered items had survived since ancient times. Normally, players had no hope of encountering such weapons and equipment. When a mana weapon or piece of equipment had surfaced in the past, players had fought fiercely over the item. After all, high-tiered mana weapons could grant players the power to defeat opponents of a higher tier. No player in God's domain could resist the temptation. Yet, over 10,000 mana weapons were on display before him. Why wouldn't Shifeng be astonished? As expected of a lost town, it's no wonder why the various superpowers fought over them so desperately. Shifeng sighed ruefully as he felt the flowing mana within the spear he held. In the past, Shifeng had assumed that the various superpowers only vied for the lost town's abilities. However, it seemed that that had only been a part of the reason. The riches these lost towns contained was likely another major factor. Unlike ordinary weapons, mana weapons did not have a level requirement, only a tier requirement. They were somewhat similar to magic scrolls, although magic scrolls couldn't compare to the power of a mana weapon. Magic scrolls were generally single-use items, but mana weapons could be used until their durability hit 0. Hence, these weapons' market price had been insanely high in Shifeng's previous life. A Tier 1 mana weapon had cost at least 150 gold in the past, far more expensive than Tier 1 magic scrolls. Even so, tons of players had fought for the chance to wield one. After all, only a small fraction of God's domain's player population had reached the higher tiers. Not all players could do so. Meanwhile, Tier 1 mana weapons would even be of significant help to Tier 2 players. One of these weapons could, at the very least, increase a Tier 2 player's combat power by 20%. If a Tier 1 player used a Tier 1 mana weapon, their combat power would increase by a minimum of 50%. Although the boost wasn't as impactful as a berserk skill, it still allowed elite players to face expert players of the same tier and level. Many wealthy elite and ordinary expert players had purchased Tier 1 mana weapons to use in critical situations. As for Tier 2 mana weapons, they had sold for at least 1,000 gold each in the past. Tier 2 mana weapons would even be useful to Tier 3 players. Tier 3 mana weapons were even more frightening, even providing a significant boost to Tier 4 players. They were no less valuable than Tier 4 magic scrolls, and the various superpowers had fought desperately to claim any Tier 3 mana weapon that had been found. Meanwhile, the majority of the weapons in the hall were Tier 1 mana weapons. Even so, Shifeng spotted over 1,000 Tier 2 mana weapons, and most importantly, he counted 12 Tier 3 mana weapons in crystal cabinets in the hall's center. If he sold all of these mana weapons, he'd earn enough coins to make the various super guilds drool. As Shifeng prepared to store every mana weapon in his bag, the system's familiar voice reached his ears. System, this item is still bound and cannot be stored in your bag. System, if you wish to remove this item's bound status, you must take control of the lost town. Sure enough, the system won't allow players to obtain such an advantage so easily. Shifeng smiled bitterly at the spear in his hands. However, after giving the matter some thought, he found it reasonable. If he were allowed to walk away with every mana weapon in this hall, he'd make a huge profit even if he failed to secure the lost town itself. It seems that I have no choice but to collect the weapons after I take control of the town. Shifeng refocused his attention and made his way towards the tower's top floor. At the same time, he became more interested in capturing this lost town. If he took control of this town, not only would Zero Wing secure another method of nurturing refinement realm experts, but they'd also rake in a massive fortune. The guild would then have all the manpower and wealth it needed. With these factors taken care of, it would be odd if the guild didn't become a major power. Soon, Shifeng reached the tower's second floor. The second-floor hall was visibly smaller than the first-floor hall, and 10 translucent ghosts wandered the area. Some wore plate armor, some wore leather armor, and some wore cloth armor. Every one of these ghosts radiated a horrific aura, and even Shifeng felt an intense pressure weigh down on him as he bathed in the powerful energy. Wandering Soul, Undead, Grand Lord. Level 80. HP 180 000 000 180 000 000. Tyrant Soul, Undead, Mythic. Level 80. HP 420 000 000 420 000 000. Shifeng could not help his surprise when he saw all of these powerful monsters, and a frown pulled at his lips. Had he only had to face one level 80 Grandlord, he wouldn't have had much of a problem, but there were a total of 9 level 80 Grandlords before him. Moreover, the distance between each Grand Lord was practically negligible. If he attracted one of the Wandering Souls, he was guaranteed to pull the other 8 Wandering Souls. However, these 9 Wandering Souls weren't his biggest problem. There was actually a mythic-ranked Tyrant Soul. Although Shifeng recognized his own strength, he'd grossly overestimate himself if he thought that he could defeat a level 80 mythic monster. In fact, the Tyrant Soul could likely one-shot him. I guess the system doesn't intend to allow anyone on the 3rd floor. Shifeng felt his head ache as he looked at the Tyrant Soul, who remained motionless in the center of the hall. The spiral staircase that led to the 3rd floor lay directly behind the Tyrant Soul. Shifeng had assumed that he would be able to walk up to the tower's top floor effortlessly, but it seemed that obtaining the magic crystal treasure chest would be more difficult than he had thought. If he had faced such a situation outside of the tower, he could likely rely on Zero Wing and the White Tiger Dojo's members to sneak past the Tyrant Soul and Wandering Souls. However, they were still stuck outside of the tower, as were the 5 Great Lords under his control. Without his Great Lords and the other players, dodging the Wandering Souls' attacks would be extremely difficult. If the Tyrant Soul joined the fray, he'd likely die in an instant. Although he had an invulnerability skill, Absolute Domain had a short duration of 10 seconds. Dashing from the edge of the 2nd floor hall to the staircase and ascending to the 3rd floor to open the magic crystal treasure chest in 10 seconds was impossible. Once Absolute Domain's duration ended, the Tyrant Soul would slap him down. Yet, if he gave up, he'd never retrieve the magic crystal treasure chest. It was even a gold magic crystal treasure chest. He had only heard rumors of such a thing during his previous life. Shifeng then calmed himself and moved around the hall while observing the Tyrant Soul and Wandering Souls, hoping to find some angle he could take advantage of. But after watching the monsters for over 10 minutes, he failed to find any opportunities. While he had been watching, the Tyrant Soul had stood deathly still in front of the spiral staircase. If he attempted to approach the staircase, the mythic-ranked boss would likely discover him. With no external factors to take advantage of, Shifeng was forced to flip through his bag, hoping that he'd find something useful. As Shifeng began to consider giving up, he noticed that he still had a Tier 3 defensive magic scroll. He had obtained the scroll from the Purgatory Serpent. As his gaze touched upon the scroll, Shifeng's hopes rekindled. A Tier 3 defensive magic scroll could even block a Tier 4 existence's attacks for a short time. With the scroll and his absolute domain, it wasn't entirely impossible to secure the magic crystal treasure chest. Now, the only problem was the Tyrant Soul's exact strength. If it were too powerful, it wouldn't need much time to break through the defensive magic scroll's barrier, and Shifeng's death would be certain. After considering his options for some time, Shifeng decided that it was worth a try. If he died, he'd lose 1 level at most. 1 level was a small price to pay for a gold magic crystal treasure chest. Following which, Shifeng used Phantom Kill and had his doppelganger carefully cross to the opposite side of the hall. Meanwhile, Shifeng readied the Tier 3 defensive magic scroll before activating the aura of Wind's Gale domain and charging forward. When Shifeng was within 100 yards of the Tyrant Soul and Wandering Souls, A cold glint flashed in the 10 monsters' eyes. They charged at Shifeng like ferocious beasts. The tyrant's soul moved like lightning. Before Shifeng had even crossed 5 yards, the mythic monster had appeared before him. The Gossamer boss had already conjured a blue lightning blade in its right hand and swung it down towards Shifeng. Chapter 1627 Magic Crystal Treasure Chest. Chapter 1627 Magic Crystal Treasure Chest. Chapter 1627 Magic Crystal Treasure Chest. So fast. Shifeng's complexion darkened when he saw the tyrant's soul appear before him suddenly. Although he had long since known that he was no match for a level 80 mythic monster, he had never imagined that the tyrant's soul would be so agile. Despite his dark iron bloodline, he could only barely catch a glimpse of the tyrant's soul's moving figure. Meanwhile, the tyrant's soul did not give Shifeng any opportunity to defend himself as it gathered mana in its right hand and molded it into a blade of lightning. It then swung the blue lightning blade down at Shifeng. The lightning blade tore through the air effortlessly, producing not a single sound as it descended on Shifeng. Or to put it in another way, the lightning blade moved so swiftly that even the sound it generated could not keep up with it. Shifeng immediately understood that it was already too late for him to defend himself using his swords. Yet, if he allowed the lightning blade to land on him, he would die without a doubt. At the critical moment, he used divine steps, 10 doppelgangers of himself splitting out from his body. Then, he promptly switched positions with one of his doppelgangers. The moment Shifeng was done switching positions, the doppelganger he had swapped with got split in half by the tyrant's soul. The lightning blade also left a thin crack beneath the doppelganger's feet, the crack extending 50 yards. Only a brief moment later did the sound of air being torn apart enter his ears. For a moment, Shifeng was even under the illusion that the tyrant's soul's attack had split the entire second floor in half. Right then, when Shifeng looked at the tyrant's soul, which was clad in a set of dark gold-colored runic armor with a pitch-black crown on its head, he could not help but doubt it was actually a mythic monster. Mythic monsters were indeed powerful and possessed superb basic attributes. However, in terms of combat standards, most were on par with ordinary experts, who were only capable of reaching the trial tower's 5th floor. However, through that single attack, Shifeng could tell that the tyrant's soul was already close to reaching the refinement realm standard. It had no excess actions in its movements. Including the absolute speed it possessed, the tyrant's soul could slaughter even a party of Tier 3 experts of the same level. If not for divine steps, he would have no doubt been killed instantly just now. Not daring to waste any time, Shifeng immediately dashed towards the spiral staircase while having his 10 doppelgangers distract the tyrant's soul. Although the doppelgangers summoned using divine steps were incapable of attacking, they were also invulnerable. No matter how the tyrant's soul attacked them, they would remain unaffected. Hence, they definitely had a chance to delay the tyrant's soul for a brief moment. After all, regardless of how powerful a monster was, their intellect was still far from comparable to NPCs, much less to players. In the blink of an eye, Shifeng had shaken the tyrant's soul off his tail. However, after he moved forward for just a few steps, the 9 wandering souls reached him. Even Shifeng would be troubled when pitted against 9 level 80 Grand Lords. Fortunately, unlike the tyrant's soul, which remained basically unaffected by Shifeng's Gale domain, the wandering souls had their movement speeds reduced considerably. In addition, Gale domain boosted Shifeng's speed significantly. Purely in terms of movement speed, Shifeng was superior to the wandering souls. Hence, he could evade the attack trajectories of the wandering souls relatively easily. For safety's sake, though, he still activated Defensive Blade. Although the combat standards of the 9 wandering souls were far from comparable to the tyrant souls, these were still at the trial tower's 4th floor. Ordinary experts would still get killed instantly if they went up against the Grand Lords. Shifeng was only relying on his advantage in speed and his grasp of his surroundings to just barely dodge the attacks of the wandering souls. However, as the wandering souls outnumbered him greatly, even he could avoid only a portion of the attacks sent at him. He had to rely on Defensive Blade to block the rest. Following which, Defensive Blade's block count continuously decreased as Shifeng neared the spiral staircase. 10 times. 8 times. 5 times. When defensive blades' block count was close to depleted, Shifeng was still over 20 yards away from the staircase. At this time, the 9 wandering souls gave up on trying to engage Shifeng in a melee and switched to spells to attack him. Suddenly, dozens of shadow blades formed in midair. They even know Shadow Sanctions, the fastest Tier 3 spell available. Shifeng frowned. There were weak spells and strong spells. Likewise, there were slow spells and fast spells. Shadow Sanctions was the fastest Tier 3 spell available in the game. Although it packed a weak punch and barely dealt any damage against monsters and players of the same level and tier, when used against a player that was inferior in terms of both levels and tiers, it could easily become a lethal spell. Not to mention, all 9 wandering souls were using the same spell. Even a Tier 3 player of the same level would get killed if they were careless. In the next moment, under the control of the wandering souls, the dozens of shadow blades flew towards Shifeng. Shoo! 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 Just when the shadow blades were about to reach Shifeng, he switched positions with the doppelganger he summoned using Phantom Kill and appeared on the other side of the spiral staircase. As for his doppelganger, the numerous shadow blades instantly annihilated it. Close one. Shifeng felt extremely fortunate that he had not tried to defend against those shadow blades. The only way he could have blocked all those attacks just now was with Absolute Domain. However, if he wasted Absolute Domain here, even if he managed to reach the magic crystal treasure chest later, he would be powerless to do anything about it. After killing his doppelganger, the wandering souls charged at Shifeng's real body once again. However, they were too far away. By the time the wandering souls arrived at the spiral staircase, he was already halfway up. Since Shifeng's movement speed originally surpassed that of the wandering souls, despite the Grand Lords giving their all into chasing him, the distance between them only widened. Shortly after, Shifeng arrived at the top floor of the tower. Sure enough, it isn't locked. Shifeng grew ecstatic when he saw the magic crystal treasure chest placed in the middle of the top floor. Previously, he couldn't determine whether the treasure chest was locked or not. From what he knew of magic crystal treasure chests, they were never locked. However, those treasure chests all had silver runes carved on them. Hence, he had not been certain that gold magic crystal treasure chests wouldn't have locks. By the time Shifeng got to the treasure chest, the 9 wandering souls had just arrived on the top floor. When the Grand Lords noticed Shifeng's location, they let loose an angry outcry that echoed throughout the entire tower. Even the Zero Wing members and White Tiger Dojo disciples resting over 100 yards away from the tower could not help but shudder at the Grand Lord's powerful roars. What's going on? Quick, look. The guild leader has already arrived before the treasure chests. Wait, there seem to be monsters. What? Those are 9 level 80 Grand Lords. Everyone's eyes widened when they looked at the wandering souls chasing after Shifeng. Initially, they had felt excited at his obtaining the magic crystal treasure chest. Now, they only felt sympathy for him. Even if their entire team of nearly 700 players went up against one wandering soul, they would not be able to make the Grand Lord break a sweat. Yet, now, 9 of these level 80 Grand Lords had actually appeared at the same time. Who could possibly stop them? When the wandering souls were less than 10 yards away from Shifeng, his lips suddenly curled up in a smile. Activate. Triple Flame Barrier. In the next moment, Shifeng unfurled the Tier 3 magic scroll in his hand and completed the activation chant. Suddenly, emerald flames emerged from the ground around Shifeng and formed a pyramid that enveloped him completely. When the 9 wandering souls bombarded Shifeng with spells, their spells were all burnt into oblivion by the emerald flames. When the weapons the wandering souls wielded clashed against the flame pyramid, they immediately melted under the high temperatures of the flames. The might of the triple flame barrier exceeded Shifeng's expectations entirely. Following which, Shifeng started opening the magic crystal treasure chest. The triple flame barrier lasted 30 seconds. Normally, that should be just enough time to activate a treasure chest. When Shifeng clicked on the magic crystal treasure chest, the loading bar that appeared before him showed that it would take 30 seconds to open the treasure chest. Upon seeing this, he breathed out a sigh of relief. However, 3 seconds into the activation process, a flash of lightning appeared at the spiral staircase. When the lightning disappeared, the figure of the tyrant's soul appeared. At this moment, the tyrant's soul's eyes were releasing scorching flames, its entire body wreathed in golden arcs of electricity. As soon as the tyrant's soul appeared, it immediately began chanting an incantation while writing divine runes in the air. In the next moment, a magic array with a 100-yard radius formed in the sky above the tyrant's soul. Several plasma balls the size of hills started coalescing below the magic array. Under the mythic monster's guidance, the plasma balls then rained down on Shifeng one after another. Chapter 1628 Tyrant. Chapter 1628 Tyrant. Chapter 1628 Tyrant. What with the appearance of the massive magic array and the hill-sized plasma balls that blotted out the sky above the tower, it felt as if Armageddon had descended. Loud crackling sounds echoed throughout the space around the White Tower. The frightening pressure from the massive magic array made the hearts of the players standing below the tower palpitate, their breathing becoming somewhat stifled. When the crowd below the tower saw the tyrant's soul, which hovered in midair, their mouths gaped in shock. A mythic. That's a mythic monster. We're doomed. Why is there such a powerful monster here? Whether it was Zero Wing's internal members or the White Tiger Dojo's disciples, they rarely ever raided dungeons, much less fought against incomparably powerful bosses. The strongest monster they'd fought against thus far was the Purgatory Serpent. Meanwhile, just the Purgatory Serpent alone had already made them despair. Their reaction to the mythic monster before them went without saying. Looking at the tyrant's soul, although everyone knew that the mythic monster's target wasn't them, their minds still could not help but conceive the thought of turning around and fleeing. Meanwhile, when Shifeng looked at the descending plasma balls, his complexion darkened significantly. Although he had long since known that his doppelgangers could only delay the tyrant's soul for a short time, he had not expected the mythic monster to be ruthless enough to use Thunder Plasma, a Tier 4 spell, as soon as it appeared. Tier 4 spells originally already possessed frightening destructive power, but Thunder Plasma was even one of the top-ranking Tier 4 spells available in the game. The spell's power was very close to rivaling that of a Tier 4 curse. Even Tier 4 monsters would be heavily injured if struck by this spell. At this moment, however, it was already too late for Shifeng to do anything about the situation. While activating a treasure chest, players were not allowed to move away. As long as they shifted their position, they would have to redo the activation process. Not to mention, now that the plasma balls were already descending on him, he wouldn't be able to escape getting struck unless he moved out of the spell's 100-yard radius AoE. In the next moment, numerous plasma balls bombarded the triple flame barrier one after another. Boom! 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 Each time a plasma ball landed on the triple flame barrier, the emerald flame pyramid trembled violently. With each subsequent blast, the emerald flames also weakened. The sound of each impact echoed throughout the lost town. The intense shockwaves created were palpable even for the crowd standing over 100 yards away from the tower. Thunder Plasma lasted for a total of 6 seconds. By the time the spell ended, cracks had appeared in the formerly sturdy triple flame barrier. The emerald flames had also dimmed considerably. Upon seeing that the triple flame barrier was still standing, Shifeng could not help but breathe out a sigh of relief. As expected of a spell known for having power approaching that of Tier 4 curses, its might really is frightening. After taking a glance at the triple flame barrier's remaining duration, Shifeng could not help but smile bitterly. The barrier originally should have been able to last 30 seconds. Only a few seconds had passed since he activated it, yet after the bombardment from Thunder Plasma, the system actually notified him that the triple flame barrier's remaining duration was just 12 seconds. Despite the triple flame barrier's duration remaining completely unaffected even when receiving the assault of the Wandering Souls, a single attack from the Tyrant's Soul had depleted the barrier's energy so significantly. If the Tyrant's Soul executed another attack of similar power, the triple flame barrier would definitely break. Fortunately, Thunder Plasma was a spell with a very long cooldown. Even if the Tyrant's Soul was a mythic monster, it wouldn't be able to use Thunder Plasma again anytime soon. However, even while Shifeng was having such thoughts, the Tyrant's Soul began chanting an incantation and writing divine runes once again. Compared to when it was casting Thunder Plasma, the Tyrant's Soul spent much more time casting this spell. It invested a total of 6 seconds into it. After the mythic monster was done chanting, a new magic array appeared in the space above the tower. Although this magic array's AoE was not as large as Thunder Plasma's magic array, it was a bona fide twofold magic array, a silver magic array and a pitch-black magic array. As the two magic arrays intermingled, they sucked the lost town dry of its ambient mana. For a moment, everyone inside the town felt their perception and vision blur. Is there a need to be so desperate? Shifeng was at a loss for words when he saw the twofold magic array in the sky. Tier 4 Curse, Thunder God's Annihilation. Although the curse's AoE was much smaller, in terms of power, it was much stronger than even ordinary Tier 5 spells. Even Tier 5 creatures would dread this curse. They would definitely sustain severe injuries if struck by it. In the next moment, the two magic arrays transformed into a ball of black and white light. Arcs of electricity also wreathed the ball of light. As the ball of light descended, it was as if the space surrounding it froze. At this moment, the tyrant's soul also abruptly revealed a human-like sneer as it looked at Shifeng as if it was saying, "What else can you do?" At this moment, even if Shifeng was a fool, he could tell that the triple flame barrier wouldn't be able to endure this apocalyptic attack. Gritting his teeth, he immediately took out a crimson elemental source and set it in the heart of the triple flame barrier's magic array. Elemental sources had many uses, with their main purpose being the creation of elemental weapons. However, Shifeng could not care less right now. If he wanted to have any chance to acquire the magic crystal treasure chest, his only choice was to use the fire-type elemental source. If he failed today, obtaining the treasure chest would definitely become much harder in the future. In God's domain, monsters, particularly high-tiered monsters, all possessed a certain degree of intellect. If he failed to obtain the treasure chest today, the tyrant's soul would definitely guard the treasure chest much more strictly on his next visit. After going through so many difficulties to get to this point, Shifeng had no intention of giving up just like that. As the refined energy of the elemental source flowed into the triple flame barrier, the previously dim, emerald flames flared up. Moreover, the color of the flames even transformed from emerald to white hot. Now, the flame pyramid looked more like a dazzling sun brightly illuminating the entire lost town. When the ball of black and white light crashed into the triple flame barrier, the resulting impact shook the entire white tower. Even the players standing 100 yards away from the tower were sent flying over 10 yards, their bodies fell to the ground one after another. Shocked expressions filled everyone's faces as they stared at the clash of lightning and flames above the tower. The White Tiger Dojo disciples, in particular, suddenly felt as if they were living in an entirely different world from Shifeng. At the same time, they also came to have a new understanding of the battles in God's domain. Before, they thought that it was already plenty amazing that players could conduct superhuman battles in the game. However, the battle they were witnessing now could no longer be considered to be a player's battle. Instead, it was more like a battle between two apocalyptic beasts. A simple exchange between these beasts could easily deform the surrounding terrain. As the seconds passed by, the dazzling triple flame barrier began fading. The lost town returned to its dimly illuminated state. Fortunately, the ball of black and white light also started decreasing in size. After nearly 10 seconds had gone by, the ball of light disappeared. Meanwhile, the flame pyramid created by the triple flame barrier had also reverted to an emerald color. Shifeng breathed out a deep sigh of relief after seeing this situation. Fortunately, he had brought along elemental sources with him, which allowed him to strengthen the Tier 3 triple flame barrier, letting it possess the might of a Tier 4 defensive spell. However, the tyrant's soul's Thunder God's Annihilation had also depleted the elemental source's energy completely. Although the elemental source's power was exhausted, the triple flame barrier's duration had also recovered to its normal state. It would now last him until the activation process of the treasure chest was over. However, the tyrant's soul did not stop attacking despite the failure of its second attack. It immediately started preparing another Tier 4 spell to bombard Shifeng with. The number of Tier 4 spells the mythic monster grasped astonished even Shifeng. The tyrant's soul possessed not only an extremely high combat standard but also many Tier 4 spells. Against such a monster, even a 100-man team of Tier 3 experts of the same level would get routed. Fortunately, the triple flame barrier endured the tyrant soul's third attack without faltering. Eventually, when the emerald flame pyramid disappeared, the magic crystal treasure chest also opened. Seeing the treasure chest open infuriated the tyrant's soul. Its body started to release pitch-black fog. Then, the mythic monster charged at Shifeng with the speed of lightning. Shifeng activated Absolute Domain without hesitation. Without even looking, he frantically plucked items from inside the treasure chest and placed them in his bag. Die! The tyrant's soul could not help but bellow in rage at this scene. This time, though, the mythic monster did not gather mana and summon a lightning blade to its hand. Instead, it unsheathed a rusted longsword hung around its waist. Although this longsword looked very ordinary, space tore apart wherever the edge of this longsword crossed. The tyrant's soul swung the longsword down at Shifeng ruthlessly. Chapter 1629, Saint Weapon. Chapter 1629, Saint Weapon. Chapter 1629, Saint Weapon. Shifeng's complexion darkened at the sight of the rusted longsword descending towards him. Although Tier 4 existences were capable of tearing apart space with their attacks, this required a considerable amount of effort. Yet, the tyrant soul's rusted longsword achieved this feat with seemingly no effort on the mythic monster's part. This meant that every one of the tyrant soul's normal attacks would carry power equivalent to that of an ordinary mythic monster executing an all-out attack. As the rusted longsword descended, a black seam cut at the golden barrier that appeared around Shifeng. Boom! Along with a loud boom, a powerful gale surged into the tower's surroundings. The players standing outside the tower lost their footing once more. What kind of monster is this? Is a mythic monster really that powerful? Everyone could not help but gape in shock as they gazed up at the tyrant's soul. Just the shockwave from one of the tyrant's soul's attacks reduced them to such a miserable state. If they fought the mythic monster, the consequences would be unimaginable. As the dust above the tower settled, Shifeng, who had activated Absolute Domain, emerged, apparently intact. However, the impact resulting from the attack had driven him back several steps before he could stabilize himself. What is that sword? Shifeng wore a grim expression as he stared at the tyrant soul's long sword. Although Absolute Domain was an invulnerability skill, there was no true invulnerability in God's domain. Even so, Absolute Domain should have no problem blocking Tier 4 attacks. Yet, against the tyrant soul's long sword, Absolute Domain was no longer absolute. Absolute Domain created a protective barrier made up of divine runes around his body. Meanwhile, the moment the rusted longsword collided with the protective barrier, Shifeng had clearly seen the rusted longsword moving roughly an inch into the barrier, deforming it. The intense impact had even forced him to retreat by 4 steps. This was something Shifeng had never seen happen before. Not waiting for Shifeng to make a move, the tyrant soul immediately brandished its rusted longsword again. Suddenly, several black seams extended towards him. Previously, one black seam had been enough to drive Shifeng back by several steps already. When multiple black seams descended on him simultaneously, he suddenly felt death looming over him. Without hesitation, he activated Disintegration Field to suppress the tyrant's soul. Although the domain skill had little effect on mythic monsters, it could still reduce the tyrant's soul's basic attributes slightly. Following which, Shifeng activated the Tier 2 taboo skill Instant Strike, instantly disappearing from his original location, appearing slightly closer to the tyrant's soul, and narrowly avoiding the several spatial tier attacks. Although Instant Strike increased both his damage and attack speed drastically, Shifeng had no intention of clashing with the tyrant's soul. Instead, he turned around and continued looting the magic crystal treasure chest. The treasure chest held many items. However, since he did not know which one was the most valuable, he simply picked up as many as he could. In the blink of an eye, 2 more items entered his bag. Upon seeing this, the tyrant's soul became even more enraged and brandished its rusted sword again. The tyrant's soul's attack speed was extremely fast. Even Shifeng could not dodge the mythic monster's attacks in time. Knowing this, he decided not to dodge and allowed the tyrant's soul to attack him as it wished while he continued looting the treasure chest. Right now, every additional item he obtained counted. Boom! 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 Beneath the bombardment, Shifeng got pushed aside time after time. As a result of receiving multiple powerful attacks in quick succession, the duration of the protective shield, which should have lasted 10 seconds, decreased significantly. Regardless, Shifeng persisted in looting the treasure chest. "Despicable thief! You dare take my family's treasures! I will turn you into ashes," the tyrant's soul bellowed. In the next moment, the black fog its body emitted merged with the rusted longsword. Suddenly, silver divine runes started appearing along the rusted blade of the longsword. Although the blade looked very ordinary, the instant the runes on the silver blade lit up, Shifeng, who was heading towards the treasure chest once again after being blown away, abruptly halted in his tracks. He then instinctively retreated a step. Death. Shifeng saw his death when he looked at the silver longsword. Moreover, this wasn't any ordinary death. For a moment, he felt that, should he take another step forward, he would thoroughly disappear from God's domain. Meanwhile, when the tyrant's soul looked at Shifeng now, although its complexion had paled considerably and it appeared quite fatigued, absolute confidence filled its eyes. It was as if it knew that at this moment, nothing could stop its attack. Not good. Shifeng suddenly thought of a certain matter, his complexion turning ashen instantly. He hastily switched to the aura of space and activated space movement, opening a spatial tunnel before him. Despite absolute domain having another 3 seconds left, he jumped into the spatial tunnel without hesitation. As soon as Shifeng jumped into the spatial tunnel, the tyrant's soul arrived before the tunnel and slashed its long sword at the tunnel. When the long sword descended, the clouds a long distance away split apart. Likewise, the spatial tunnel, which the silver long sword had made direct contact with, was cut in half. What kind of attack is that? When the far-off members of Zero Wing and the White Tiger Dojo saw the massive tear in space that had appeared above the tower as well as the bisected spatial tunnel, their eyes nearly fell out of their own sockets. A spatial tunnel was created by opening a hole in space. Yet, the tyrant's soul had actually managed to slice even the spatial tunnel in half. Meanwhile, after the spatial tunnel was cut in two, it instantly disappeared into nothingness. "Despicable thief! I will never let you get away," the tyrant's soul bellowed in rage when it saw Shifeng escaping successfully, its voice echoing throughout the lost town. When the members of Zero Wing and White Tiger Dojo, who stood at a distance, felt the killing intent the tyrant's soul radiated, they felt as if their bodies had petrified, they did not dare to move even in the slightest. Meanwhile, beside a flowing stream located in a map neighboring the Boneless Land, Shifeng suddenly appeared. The moment he exited the spatial tunnel, he collapsed to the ground, panting heavily. That was close. He had very nearly lost everything. As expected of the guardian of a gold magic crystal treasure chest. It actually possesses even a saint weapon. When Shifeng recalled the tyrant's soul's final attack, he could not help but shudder in fear. Previously, he had failed to detect what made the tyrant's soul's longsword so special. He simply felt that it was a very powerful weapon. However, the moment he saw the divine runes on the silver longsword lighting up as well as sensed the monstrous amounts of mana the weapon exuded. Aside from a Tier 5 mana weapon, he really could not figure out what other weapons could replicate such a feat. Mana weapons were originally meant to suck dry the potential of their raw materials and exhibit power beyond one's imagination. However, the higher tiered a mana weapon was, the more difficult it was to produce it. Among them, Tier 3 mana weapons were labeled as higher-order mana weapons, while Tier 5 mana weapons were labeled as saint weapons. Needless to say, saint weapons were exceedingly rare in God's domain, so much so that their rarity rivaled that of legendary weapons. In the past, he had seen the battle video of a Tier 5 expert wielding a saint weapon against a Tier 6 God-ranked expert. When the Tier 5 expert invested all his power into his saint weapon for an all-out attack, silver divine runes had appeared on the saint weapon. Back then, even the Tier 6 God-ranked expert had to go full bore to repulse the saint weapon's attack. One could just imagine how powerful saint weapons were. Had he been killed by the tyrant's soul's attack just now, he definitely wouldn't have lost only a single level. Most likely, even his immortal soul would have been annihilated. Fortunately, he had reacted quickly and left in time. Meanwhile, just as Shifeng was about to celebrate, The sound of a system notification entered his ears. System, you have angered the tyrant's soul. The tyrant's soul has used soul pursuit on you and will send a soul doppelganger after you once every day. Chapter 1630 Abundant Harvest. Chapter 1630 Abundant Harvest. Chapter 1630 Abundant Harvest. Shifeng could not help but frown as he read the system notification. Soul pursuit was a type of curse. It was one of the most common in God's domain and very challenging to deal with. Regardless of where players were, the user's soul doppelganger would appear beside them. Shifeng was already familiar with the tyrant's soul's power. The fact that it wielded a saint weapon put its attack power on par with ordinary Tier 5 classes. If it really came down to a fight, even a 100-man Tier 3 team of the same level would have to use special means to take the mythic monster down. Current players simply had no hope against the tyrant's soul. Although Soul Doppelganger wasn't as powerful as the main body during the first few appearances, it would grow stronger with each attempt to slay the target until it eventually rivaled its user. There were two ways to resolve this type of curse. The first was to kill the main body, while the second was to kill the final Soul Doppelganger, which would be as strong as the main body. There were no other ways to stop soul pursuit. Clearly, the first method was impossible for Shifeng right now, and the second would require a long, arduous battle with the tyrant's soul, would only complicate his future development. As Shifeng tried to think of a way to deal with the tyrant's soul's persistent pursuit, his head began to ache. If the soul doppelganger only showed up once every 3 or 5 days, he could cope, but he hadn't expected the tyrant's soul's curse to hound him once every day. In other words, he would have to defeat the tyrant's soul's soul doppelganger once every day. Moreover, it would appear at random. Although he could hide in an NPC city and let the city's guards deal with the tyrant's soul's doppelganger, he wouldn't accomplish anything if he did. Shifeng could only shake his head with a bitter smile about his situation. He had never thought that looting a magic crystal treasure chest would be so problematic. The most frustrating part was that he had only managed to grab 5 items from the magic crystal treasure chest. The chest contained at least another 5 or 6 items. Had he collected all of the items, he wouldn't have minded the tyrant's soul's hunt, yet he had to avoid the soul doppelganger despite only claiming half of the treasure chest's items. But Shifeng didn't give the matter too much thought. Instead, he instructed Zero Wing's internal members and the White Tiger Dojo's disciples to leave the lost town and wait for his arrival. Meanwhile, he examined the items he had acquired from the treasure chest. In his previous life, he had heard countless rumors about gold magic crystal treasure chests' loot even surpassing the quality of items in epic treasure chests. However, since the 12 sacred elementalists' Chaos Star had been the only known player to obtain a gold magic crystal treasure chest and had never divulged any information about his bounty, these rumors had been nothing more than that, just rumors. After Shifeng inspected the contents of his bag space, an excited expression illuminated his features, quickly replaced by one of utter shock. So, this is a gold magic crystal treasure chest. Shifeng was elated as he gazed at the 5 new items in his bag. 3 of the 5 items were pieces of equipment. One was an epic plate armor helmet called the Trembling Crown, and another was an epic shield named Trembling Shield. Both pieces of epic equipment belonged to the Trembling set, a bona fide epic ranked set equipment. When a player equipped 2 pieces of this set, the user would receive a passive skill called Tough Body, which increased the player's endurance and physique by 10% while reducing incoming damage by 20%. An epic set equipment. Acquiring a single epic weapon or piece of equipment was already difficult for God's Domain's current superpowers, not to mention epic set equipment. Even 10 years after God's Domain's launch, epic set equipment had been considered the best available in the game. After all, fragmented legendary and legendary items were simply too rare. Even though Shifeng only had 2 pieces of the Trembling set, the effects these pieces provided would significantly improve a player's combat power. If one of the guild's MTS equipped these 2 pieces, their combat power would definitely undergo a qualitative transformation. Needless to say, the stronger the guild's MTS were, the more they'd benefit the guild's development. Every guild needed powerful MTS to tank dungeon and field bosses, and if the guild didn't have an MT that could handle the task, it would never complete the raid. However, of the 3 pieces of equipment Shifeng had looted, the third piece truly surprised him. The third piece of equipment was a Tier 3 mana weapon. Unfortunately, the Tier 3 mana weapon was a 2-handed sword, not a 1-handed sword. Edgeless blade, 2-handed sword, Tier 3 mana weapon. Equipment requirement, Tier 2. Attack power, 240% of strength. All attributes, increases according to user's level and tier. When equipped, user's body will transform into a mana body, gathering nearby mana to them and strengthening their perception. Improves physique by 15%. Increases strength by 40%, agility by 30%, endurance by 20%. Increases critical rate by 10%. Decreases stamina consumption by 15%. Increases the power of all skills by 20%. Ignore levels plus 15. Durability 22-20. Additional passive skill dash. Mana strengthening. Provides additional basic attributes to the user depending on the density of the ambient mana. The higher the ambient mana density is, the higher the basic attributes provided will be. Basic attributes can increase to a maximum of 20%. Additional active skill dash. Limit blade. By absorbing the user's power and sacrificing a fraction of the weapon's durability, the edgeless blade will increase the user's strength attribute by 200% for 1 attack. Each attack costs 1 durability. As this sword is a mana weapon, it cannot be repaired. Weapon will automatically disappear when durability reaches 0. A Tier 3 mana weapon could even provide a tremendous boost to Tier 3 players, and although it was a consumable item, it was even more valuable than epic weapons. The weapon's sole active skill, Limit Blade, was particularly valuable. Although the 200% increase in strength didn't seem much compared to its significant cost, the weapon's attack power was based on the user's strength. Hence, the 200% increase to strength provided a formidable boost to the user's destructive power. If a Tier 3 player equipped this weapon, they could even stand against Tier 4 opponents of the same level. Epic weapons had no chance of achieving such a feat. However, the edgeless blade was only the third most valuable of the items Shifeng had obtained. The second most valuable item was a Tier 3 combination skill called Fiery Thunderstorm, which required 5 magical class players to perform. This combination skill could even rival a Tier 4 spell. Guilds wouldn't even sell a combination skill of this power for 100,000 magic crystals. After all, the skill that could be a trump card when challenging Tier 4 mythic monsters. Tier 4 magic scrolls were extremely rare in God's domain, but combination skills could be used indefinitely, and such scrolls could never compare to the value of Fiery Thunderstorm. Unfortunately, Fiery Thunderstorm was a single target spell, not a large-scale destruction spell. Even so, Shifeng was quite satisfied to find this spell in his bag. At the very least, he now had a weapon to deal with Tier 4 mythic monsters. The last of the 5 items was a unique crystal. It was also what shocked Shifeng the most. A burning, purple flame danced within this crystal, and arcs of golden electricity flickered around the flame. The purple flame radiated an intensely tyrannical aura, and Shifeng shuddered as he gazed at it. This flame was also an item Shifeng had been looking for a long time now. It was a Tier 3 mysterious flame called the Purple Thunder Flame. Chapter 1631, Tier 3 Mysterious Flame. Chapter 1631, Tier 3 Mysterious Flame. Chapter 1631, Tier 3 Mysterious Flame. The crystal-encased, dark purple flame was extremely eye-catching in Shifeng's bag space. "I've really struck gold this time." Shifeng was overjoyed as he gazed at the Purple Thunder Flame. This flame was easily worth more than the other items he had obtained from the magic crystal treasure chest combined. Players would only encounter a Tier 3 mysterious flame if they were lucky enough, and even Shifeng only knew the whereabouts of a small number of them. Moreover, every one of them was exceedingly difficult to obtain. Countless guilds had waged war over mysterious flames in the past. Even super guilds had gone all out to slaughter each other over Tier 3 mysterious flames. The stronger a mysterious flame was, the more it would help forger and alchemist subclasses. These tools would help forgers and alchemists produce high-rank items with ease. Shifeng had never expected that, despite only looting half of the gold magic crystal treasure chests items, he'd actually acquire a Tier 3 mysterious flame. If he looted the rest of the treasure chests items, how great would his harvest be? Now, Shifeng more or less understood why the tyrant's soul was so desperate to hunt him down. After all, a Tier 3 mysterious flame was even more valuable than epic items, and aside from being able to refine materials, mysterious flames could also improve a player's strength in combat. Why would the system let him get away with obtaining one so easily? To Shifeng, a Tier 3 mysterious flame was also a life-saving item. With this Tier 3 mysterious flame, I can buy myself some more time. Shifeng smiled at the purple thunder flame. The curse the mysterious NPC had placed on him back in Blackwing City could only be suppressed with a mysterious flame. Unfortunately, the Tier 2 Ice Blue Devil Flame was too weak, only able to delay the curse's activation for a limited amount of time. Initially, Shifeng had planned to take the risk and obtain one of the Tier 2 or 3 mysterious flames he remembered from his past when he had time. But now, he didn't need to. As long as he absorbed the Tier 3 Purple Thunder Flame and merged it with the Soul Flame, he'd have better control over the Soul Flame. He would then have more time to locate the mysterious NPC and complete the quest Shilin had given him. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng tapped on the Purple Thunder Flame and chose to bind it to himself. The moment he did so, the crystal containing the Purple Thunder Flame shattered. The dark purple flame entered Shifeng's body, and purple fire devoured his entire body. Arcs of blue electricity flickered around him as a stinging pain assaulted every inch of his body. Shortly after, a loading bar appeared before Shifeng, displaying the fusion process. 1%, 2%, 3%. The fusion was extremely slow. If an ordinary player attempted to merge with this mysterious flame, their mind might crumble under the intense pain after just a short moment. While players had the option of lowering or turning off their pain sensitivity in the game, doing so would sabotage the fusion process. Fortunately, after over 10 years in God's domain, Shifeng had acclimated to the pain. Even so, it was barely tolerable as the fusion process continued. As time passed, the pain's intensity increased, but something felt different about this fusion to Shifeng. Aside from the increased pain, it felt as if the flames refined his body as they continued to burn him. There was a pleasant feeling alongside the pain. As the pain grew worse, his perception sharpened. This surprised Shifeng. He had never heard of mysterious flames strengthening a player's perception and physique. Had the players in his previous life known that Tier 3 mysterious flames could do such a thing, every expert in the game would have gone mad to acquire one for themselves. Stronger perception would undoubtedly improve players' combat standards, and it would only become more beneficial as they reached for higher tiers. Otherwise, God's Domain's experts wouldn't have regarded bloodlines and fragmented legendary items so highly. After 20 minutes of the fusion process, Shifeng heard a series of system notifications. System: the Purple Thunder Flame has bound to player Yifeng. System: the Purple Thunder Flame's fusion has completed. After undergoing the Purple Thunder Flame's trial, player gains plus 60 to all basic attributes, physique improved by 5%, reaction speed increased by 10%, perception range increased by 10%, fire resistance plus 70, and lightning resistance plus 70. You have also gained 100% control over the Purple Thunder Flame. Following which, Shifeng proceeded to inspect the Purple Thunder Flame itself. When he saw its information, he couldn't help but gasp. Purple Thunder Flame, Tier 3 Mysterious Flame. When activated, increases movement speed and attack speed by 30%. Increases damage dealt by fire and lightning type attacks by 50%. Increases destructive effect of attacks by 100%. Increases production success rate for forging, alchemy, and cooking by 15%. Shifeng wasn't surprised by the increase to movement and attack speed, but he had never expected a 100% increase to destructive effects. Although it wouldn't improve players' strength or attack power, the increased destructive effects would be devastating against players and monsters' defense. A player might struggle against a Great Lord's defense normally, but if their attacks had double the destructive effect, they'd be able to break through the Great Lord's defenses and defeat it in far less time. Likewise, such a boost would be miraculous in PvP. It was common knowledge that players mainly relied on their weapons and equipment for strength. Without weapons and equipment, a player's attributes would decrease drastically. Meanwhile, players would be able to deplete the durability of their opponent's weapons and equipment more quickly with increased destructive effect. As for the 15% improvement to production success rate, it was 5% higher than the Tier 2 Ice Blue Devil Flame. Although it was only a difference of 5%, the Tier 3 Purple Thunder Flame's performance when refining high-rank materials would be leaps and bounds better than the weaker Mysterious Flame. If Shifeng used the Tier 3 Purple Thunder Flame when forging Conqueror's armor, his success rate would skyrocket. After fusing with the Purple Thunder Flame, Shifeng activated Spatial Gate and regrouped with the rest of his team outside of the Lost Town. Although the Tyrant's Soul had used Soul Pursuit on him, Shifeng discovered that the Tyrant's Soul itself couldn't leave the White Tower after a few experiments. This outcome allowed Shifeng to breathe a sigh of relief. At the very least, he wouldn't have to lead his team elsewhere to grind and level up. After regrouping with his team, he continued to kill the demonic creatures in the Lost Town's inner area, steadily raising everyone's levels while grinding for mana and Eternium ore. After grinding for another 2 days or so, Shifeng and the others finally cleared out every demonic creature in the Lost Town. The only place they had yet to check was the bottomless pit in the town's center. Meanwhile, after 2 days of grinding, everyone's levels had risen from nearly level 48 to almost level 50. As for Shifeng, he had invested all of the EXP into leveling Flame Burst and Lightning Edge. Despite being a Tier 2 player, he only had a small number of Tier 2 skills in his arsenal, and if he were forced to rely on Tier 1 skills, he'd never be able to exert the full advantages of a Tier 2 class. Hence, Shifeng leveled these 2 Tier 1 skills to Tier 2. By doing so, both skills had undergone a qualitative transformation in terms of raw power. Flame Burst. Tier 2, Level 3, requires 1,800,000,000 EXP to upgrade to Tier 2, Level 4 skill. Channeling time, 1 second. Gathers the power of flames to a single point and causes 1400% damage to the target. Attack count, 16 times. Cooldown, 3 minutes. Lightning Edge, action type. Tier 2, Level 2, requires 1,600,000,000 EXP to upgrade to Tier 2, Level 3. Channeling time, 0.5 seconds. Deals 1200% physical and 1200% lightning damage in a cone in front of user. Initial coverage range is 75 yards. Duration, 5 seconds. Cooldown, 10 minutes. Tier 2 skills weren't just capable of dealing more raw damage than their Tier 1 counterparts, they'd also be more effective against monsters and players of the same tier. Once these skills rose to Tier 2, they wouldn't be bound by tier suppression. It's about time to show everyone Zero Wing's strength. After taking a look at his team members' levels, Shifeng contacted Aqua Rose and asked, "Aqua, how's the equipment collection coming along?" Chapter 1632, Formation of an Expert Legion. Chapter 1632, Formation of an Expert Legion. Chapter 1632, Formation of an Expert Legion. Starmoon Kingdom, Zero Wing City, Zero Wing's residence. A depressing atmosphere filled the massive guild residence. Everyone's minds were overwhelmed by an oppressive feeling, causing them great distress. Big Sis Aqua, we just received news that the Blackwater Corporation has invested another 200,000 gold into Heaven's Burial. The guild has also hired more refinement realm experts to hunt us down. They're even beginning to overpower the conqueror parties we've recalled to defend our leveling maps. Moreover, according to our spies in Heaven's Burial, it seems that Heaven's Burial has obtained another significant harvest from the primordial ancient ruin. Apparently, the guild has collected 2 sets of top-tier intermediate magic array scrolls and plenty of top-tier level 50 weapons and equipment. At this point, they're already preparing to raid a level 50 super large-scale team dungeon. Yaya reported as she stood beside Aqua Rose with a somber expression. Zero Wing had grown stronger over the past few days as more players gathered in Zero Wing City. However, The number of players withdrawing from the guild also continued to increase. They had done so because Zero Wings members were almost guaranteed to be ambushed whenever they went to the fields to grind. They could have endured if the situation had only lasted 2 or 3 days, but this had continued for over a week already. Everyone in the guild had long since grown tired of it. Their leveling speed and equipment acquisition rate had suffered severely, as well. To make things worse, Heaven's Burial had grown rapidly in every aspect despite the ongoing war. Many Zero Wing members' wills began to falter. They could no longer see any hope of Zero Wing winning this war, and so, many had given up and left while they still could. They're already starting a super large-scale team dungeon raid? Aqua Rose frowned. At this point, many large guilds had already raided level 50, 100-man team dungeons successfully, but not one of them had raided a level 50 super large-scale team dungeon. Unfortunately, only these dungeons contained level 50 top-tier equipment and set equipment. If Heaven's Burial obtained the first clear of a super large-scale team dungeon in Star Moon Kingdom, the pressure its success would bring on Zero Wing's members would be crushing, even if the guild failed to exhaust Zero Wing. By obtaining the first clear of a level 50 super large-scale team dungeon, not only would a guild obtain a 3-star guild residence promotion order, but it would also obtain level 50 top-tier weapons and equipment. What was players' purpose of joining a guild? Wasn't it to help them obtain better weapons and equipment while leveling faster? As long as Heaven's Burial succeeded, a ton of experts would try to join the guild. After all, not even independent teams could clear a super large-scale team dungeon. As she watched Heaven's Burial grow stronger by the day, Aqua Rose gradually came to understand how frightening guilds with major corporation support were. With an endless financial supply, a guild could attract as many experts and gain as many resources as it wanted. There was simply no way that Zero Wing, a guild that had been built from nothing, could compete with such guilds. It took everything Zero Wing had just to cope with Heaven's Burial's offensive. Big Sis Aqua, Heaven's Burial has stated that if Zero Wing is willing to hand over 51% of its shares, they'll stop their assault on the guild. If we continue to resist, however, they'll thoroughly obliterate us from God's domain. They've only given us 2 days to consider their offer. Here's a video they sent, Yaya whispered. What? Aqua Rose had been about to reject the proposal instantly, but after watching the video from Heaven's Burial, her expression turned solemn. The video depicted an army of evil beasts and evil demons. Although the army was not particularly large, only around 30,000 soldiers, it was an unprecedentedly high-quality force. Among the monsters, the army had over 5 level 72 mythic-ranked evil beasts and 20 level 70 Grand Lord-ranked evil demons. In addition, the force included a large number of level 70 Great Lord-ranked evil demons. The weakest member of the army was Lord rank. Regarding overall strength, this evil beast and evil demon army was far more powerful than the 2 armies Zero Wing had previously faced. If these monsters took action, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even Zero Wing City might fail to stop them. As Aqua Rose struggled to think of a plan, Shifeng contacted her. Aqua, how's the equipment collection coming along? Shifeng asked. We're almost done. We'll have everything we need in a few more hours, Aqua Rose responded dejectedly. All right. I've finished my task as well. I'll return in a moment. Shifeng nodded in satisfaction, surprised by Aqua Rose's efficiency. Although he hadn't requested level 50 top-tier equipment, only asking for elite-grade equipment, it was still a difficult job. They've already reached level 50? Aqua Rose was stunned. They were talking about nearly 700 players. Before Shifeng had taken them out to grind, Zero Wing's internal members and the White Tiger Dojo's disciples had only been around level 30. They had been unimaginably far from level 50. In her opinion, even with Shifeng's astonishing leveling capabilities, he'd still need 2 weeks or so to power level the 700-man team to level 50. Even the most powerful elite members in the various large guilds were only around level 47 right now, and only capable expert players were close to level 50. After all, players needed drastically more EXP to level up after reaching level 45. Yet, Shifeng had helped nearly 700 players catch up to peak experts in less than half of the time she had assumed. They've all reached level 50. Some have even reached level 51, Shifeng said, nodding. If not for the lack of demonic creatures around the lost town, he wouldn't have had an issue getting everyone to level 51 or beyond. Aqua Rose was dazed for a long moment after hearing Shifeng's answer. Level 50 was a major turning point in God's domain. Despite Heaven's Burial's massive expert count, the majority of its experts were stuck at level 49, still far from hitting level 50. Although the difference was only one level, the equipment quality was monumental. With the addition of so many level 50 experts, Zero Wing's combat power would rise significantly. However, when Aqua Rose recalled the video Heaven's Burial had sent, her excitement cooled. Guild leader, here is a video Heaven's Burial just sent. They want us to hand over 51% of Zero Wing's shares, or they'll proceed with even more drastic measures to destroy us, Aqua Rose said as she forwarded the video to Shifeng. Against so many high-ranked evil beasts and evil demons, even Zero Wing's additional 700 expert players would be no more than throwing a bucket of water on a forest fire. They've already grown so strong, Shifeng muttered as he watched the evil beasts and evil demons in the video. Although he had expected something like this, he couldn't help his astonishment when he actually saw the real deal. In addition to more than 5 level 72 mythic ranked evil beasts and 20 level 70 Grandlord ranked evil demons, the monster army included more than 1,000 Grandlord ranked evil beasts and Great Lord ranked evil demons. With such a force, Heaven's Burial would have no problems capturing any guild town in Starmoon Kingdom. Chapter 1633 Intermediate Ability. Chapter 1633 Intermediate Ability. Chapter 1633 Intermediate Ability. Have you found out anything new about Starmoon Kingdom's Evil Gods Temple? Shifeng could not help but ask as he watched Aqua Rose on the screen. Even he did not have any practical methods to deal with Heaven's Burial's monster army. However, he was not particularly worried about the army, either. The situation in Starmoon Kingdom had changed since their last confrontation. NPC armies constantly patrolled the kingdom right now, and if these NPCs encountered any evil beasts or demons, they'd quickly exterminate these monsters. Hence, Heaven's Burial couldn't dispatch an army of evil beasts and evil demons en masse into the kingdom right now. Otherwise, the enemy guild would have done it already, rather than send a video and try to threaten them. Although the monster army couldn't march into the kingdom, it could dispatch small contingents of high-tiered evil demons to ambush players. Hence, Heaven's Burial's monsters were still quite a problem. If Zero Wing wanted to squash this problem thoroughly, it had to destroy the Evil Gods Temple in Starmoon Kingdom. They've hidden it quite well. Even now, we haven't found any clues leading to the kingdom's Evil Gods Temple yet, Aqua Rose said, shaking her head. She continued, moreover, even if Heaven's Burial doesn't mobilize its monster army, at the rate it's growing, it's only a matter of time before the guild overwhelms and crushes us. Based on our most recent information, Blackwater has recently hired another batch of Refinement Realm experts to help hunt our members. It's taking everything we've got just to defend ourselves. If more Refinement Realm experts join the fight, I'm afraid that we won't last very long. In addition, our financial state is particularly concerning. We've already used all of our available funds, and we don't have the support of any major corporation. We're entirely reliant on Zero Wing City, Stone Forest Town, and the Candlelight trading firm's profit to keep the guild running. If something unexpected happens that require those funds, we'll be ruined. She was also aware that Heaven's Burial had merely sent the video to scare them. However, nothing changed the fact that Heaven's Burial and Blackwater's aggression was increasing. Furthermore, Blackwater had recruited plenty of Refinement Realm experts to help in this war using its expansive connections. Initially, Blackwater had sent over 20 Refinement Realm experts to aid Heaven's Burial, and now it was sending an additional 30+ experts. Although the total count was still far less than the Conqueror parties, these Refinement Realm experts would be more than capable of keeping the Conqueror parties busy. With the Conqueror parties distracted, Heaven's Burial's other experts could attack without worry. Because of this, Zero Wing suffered severe casualties. The remuneration the guild paid out every day was astronomical. If any other guild had to pay such a price, it would have long since gone bankrupt. I understand. I'll have everyone return immediately, so your team should get ready to receive them. Also, notify Melancholic and tell her to host an auction in the Zero Wing auction house in 6 hours. We'll sell Zero Wing City's private houses and shops, Shifeng said after giving the matter some thought. Right now, he needed to deal with the guild's financial problems. Although he had tried to think of a way to increase Zero Wing's income, these revenue sources weren't enough to compete with Heaven's Burial and Blackwater. We're selling Zero Wing City's private houses and shops. But, with the current situation, I'm afraid that we'll have trouble selling them for a high price. Aqua Rose understood Shifeng's intentions. In fact, she had considered the same option. However, only a fool wouldn't see the situation of Heaven's Burial and Zero Wing's war. With that in mind, no one would willingly spend a large amount of money to purchase Zero Wing City's private houses and shops. Players might not be interested in these properties at all. If a guild town or city changed hands, any agreements with the previous owner would be null and void. Knowing this, who would possibly want to purchase land in an unstable city? Relax. Even if our situation is uncertain, what must be sold, will be, Shifeng said, chuckling. He did not bother to explain further. Aqua Rose was speechless. Although what Shifeng had said was true, selling such valuable properties at a discount wasn't worthwhile. Following which, Shifeng disconnected the call and had his team use a return scroll to teleport back to White River City. Meanwhile, Aqua Rose did as she had been told. Immediately, news of Zero Wing auctioning off its city's private houses and shops spread like wildfire throughout Starmoon Kingdom. Even the neighboring kingdoms and empires' major powers heard of the upcoming auction. Ha ha ha. So, Zero Wing is finally selling its city's private houses and shops. It seems that Zero Wing really can't hold on much longer. Zero Wing's selling their real estate now? Does Zero Wing take us for fools? When the various major powers saw Zero Wing's announcement, they laughed, ridiculing Zero Wing for falling so low. Zero Wing has finally hit its limit. Singular Burial could not help but laugh when he read the report from a subordinate. Unfortunately, it is too late. They might have found buyers had they chosen to sell the properties a few days ago, but now that Zero Wing's position in this war has become more uncertain, who would be foolish enough to buy the deeds? Notify our subordinates and have them increase their offensive against Zero Wing's members immediately. Also, spread a lie to the public, stating that we intend to attack Zero Wing City. I want to see just who actually attends Zero Wing's auction. Understood. Daybreak Fog nodded before leaving the guild leader's office. Although the various major powers understood that Zero Wing was approaching its end, many would be interested in attending the guild's auction. Aside from Zero Wing's in-house products, items were available from other players in Zero Wing's auctions. There was also the convenient option of bartering. Meanwhile, after exiting White River City's teleportation hall, Shifeng made his way to the library. Although he had already bound the purple thunder flame to himself, he needed the help of a special magic array to fuse it with the soulfire, and only Charlin was capable of conjuring this magic array. At the same time, Shifeng sent his team to deliver the mana and eternium ore they collected to the candlelight trading firm before getting some rest. Aside from the massive amount of EXP they had earned while grinding demonic creatures in the Lost Town, they had gained a plentiful harvest of ores. Moreover, the closer they had gotten to the mysterious pit in the town center, the more ores they had obtained. In total, they had collected over 15,000 pieces of mana ore and over 1,000 pieces of eternium ore. When Melancholic Smile received the haul, she was dumbfounded. Due to the high demand for mana ore, prices for the ore continued to increase. Before Shifeng had left for the Boneless Land, mana ore had sold for 1 gold, 20 silver per piece. Now, prices had risen to 1 gold, 50 silver per piece. However, even at such a price, very few people were willing to sell their mana ore. Even a large guild like Zero Wing would be fortunate to purchase a few dozen pieces each day. Yet, Shifeng had returned with over 15,000 pieces of mana ore. Even if one robbed a super guild's warehouse, they wouldn't obtain such a bounty. Even if Zero Wing used all of the mana ore to craft mana charms, it would make a massive fortune. Meanwhile, Shifeng's request was simple: use 5,000 pieces of mana or to forge mana charms and sell them. Not only would the mana charms fetch a high price, but there was also a solid market for them. With the money the guild earned, it could construct the mana tower in Zero Wing City. The largest problem when constructing a mana tower was the required materials. It required over 5,000 pieces of mana ore alone, in addition to plenty of other precious materials. Fortunately, the construction cost itself was relatively cheap, only 5,000 gold. Meanwhile, on the top floor of White River City's library, with Charlin's help, Shifeng attempted to merge the Purple Thunderflame and the Soul Fire. It was far more difficult to merge the Tier 3 Purple Thunderflame with the Soul Fire than it had been to merge the Tier 2 Ice Blue Devil Flame, since the former was more powerful. He needed more accurate control to wrap the Soul Fire around the Purple Thunder Flame. 1 attempt. 2 attempts. 3 attempts. With each subsequent attempt, Shifeng grew increasingly adept with the fusion process, so much so that he had improved his control over his own body and his environment. Shifeng was somewhat surprised at this. He had never thought that he could become stronger while trying to fuse the mysterious flames. He had thought that he had reached his limit and would have to break through to the domain realm to improve further. As Shifeng attempted his 26th fusion, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System, congratulations. You have gained rough control over the Soul Fire. You may now utilize the Soul Fire's intermediate abilities. Chapter 1634, Soulfire's New Abilities. Chapter 1634, Soulfire's New Abilities. Chapter 1634, Soulfire's New Abilities. Not even a Tier 3 Mysterious Flame is enough for me to gain full control of the Soulfire. Shifeng was slightly surprised when he saw the system notification. Tier 3 Mysterious Flames were exceedingly rare in God's domain. As far as Shifeng knew, there should only be one Tier 3 Mysterious Flame in Starmoon Kingdom. When this mysterious flame had appeared in his previous life, practically every large guild in the kingdom had fought over it. Yet, despite fusing such a rare mysterious flame, he still didn't have full control of the Soul Fire. At this point, Shifeng began to wonder if there was a high chance that the Soul Fire was actually a Tier 4 Mysterious Flame. Shifeng had only ever heard of Tier 4 mysterious flames in God's domain's legends. The power of such a flame alone would be more than enough to injure a Tier 4 existence severely. With the Soul Fire's unique ability to burn a target's soul to nothing, it would be a terrifying weapon against both monsters and players. This was especially true for players. The immortal soul was the root of players' existence in God's domain. In NPCs' eyes, players were only able to resurrect after death due to their immortal souls. If a player's immortal soul were extinguished, that player would be finished. However, it was extremely difficult to destroy a player's immortal soul. Hence, the Soul Fire should only be capable of damaging a player's immortal soul. Even so, it would be more than enough to prevent the target from logging into God's domain for some time. It would be a nightmare for any expert player. After all, in God's domain, one either improved or regressed. The game had countless players, and not being able to log in for several days would cause one to fall behind their rivals. Not bad. You've actually fused the Purple Thunder Flame so quickly. With your current control over the Soul Fire, you can weaken the Soul Chain's corrosion further. Locating that mysterious individual should become much easier, Charlin said, chuckling at Shifeng. However, you must still be careful. Although you've extended your time limit to 108 days after fusing with a Tier 3 Mysterious Flame, God's domain is very large. It might seem like a lot of time, but in reality, it isn't. It is best if you locate a few more Tier 3 Mysterious Flames during this time. That way, you'll gain better control over the Soul Fire. I only have 108 days. Shifeng was dumbfounded when he heard Charlin's warning. He had hoped to extend his time limit by a year or so after absorbing a Tier 3 Mysterious Flame, yet the system had only given him a small extension. And just as Charlin had said, locating that mysterious Tier 5 NPC would not be an easy task. He had no clues leading to the NPC, either. He could only rely on the Soul Chain. Moreover, this was a legendary quest. In general, Quests of this rank couldn't be completed within a short period. After pondering the situation for a moment, Shifeng calmed down. After all was said and done, the purple thunder flame had delayed his deadline by quite a bit. At the very least, he would have more time to deal with his own matters. Following which, Shifeng tested the soul fire's power. Immediately, Shifeng's dark pupils were consumed by silver fire. His aura also changed abruptly. If others had felt relaxed around him before, he would now feel like an icy hell. Death and cold dominated his aura. Amazing. I only have a rough control over the soul fire now, yet it is already so powerful. When Shifeng examined his surroundings, he found that his environment had changed. Not only could he see the soul chain now, but he could also see soul's wavelength. If he focused, he could even slow his perception of time. Shifeng was at a loss for words. Being able to view soul wavelengths allowed him to determine his target's strength. The stronger a creature was, the stronger its soul would be. In addition, neither players nor monsters could hide their soul wavelengths. Regardless of whether or not a player wore a black cloak or hid behind an obstacle, he could inspect and locate them easily. However, being able to detect soul wavelengths paled in comparison to the ability to slow one's perception of time. Now, he could see fast-moving objects far more clearly as long as he focused. Although this ability couldn't compare to a boost to one's physique, which allowed players to keep up with fast-moving objects and react far more quickly, improving one's physique was easier said than done. Just being able to slow his perception of time was astounding and would doubtlessly improve his combat power. I wonder what the soul fire will be capable of once I gain full control. After experiencing the soul fire's new abilities, Shifeng anticipated the day he could control it completely. He only had rough control of the soul fire, but it already offered such powerful abilities. If he had full control of the soul fire, the improvements the mysterious flame would offer would be even more impressive. Moreover, he'd be able to manifest the soul fire outside of his body as he could with the ice blue devil flame and purple thunder flame, increasing his combat power further. After dealing with the soul fire, Shifeng made his way to the candlelight trading firm and entered his personal special forging room. Although Aqua Rose had collected plenty of level 50 mysterious iron and secret silver equipment, Zipping and the others would only become as strong as the guild's ordinary experts once they equipped the items. It would be very difficult for them to change the war's overall situation. In fact, Shifeng had never hoped for anything game-changing by having Aqua Rose collect the level 50 equipment. He had only wanted to ensure that Zipping and the others wouldn't lag behind their peers regarding equipment once they caught up in levels. Even before leaving for the Boneless Land, he had tasked Melancholic Smile to purchase a large number of emeralds from Emerald City in preparation for forging the magic light sets. The magic light set wasn't like the Conqueror's armor, which required plenty of rare materials that weren't often available on the market. Emeralds were the main material required for forging the magic light set. Although emeralds were also a rare material, there was plenty available on the market. At this point, Zero Wing already possessed a huge stockpile of emeralds. As for the mana stone, another of the magic light set's core materials, Zero Wing had no lack of the stones. They could be produced indefinitely as long as the guild had enough magic crystals. Hence, producing the magic light set was much easier than the Conqueror's armor. Only, the cost was somewhat high, with each attempt costing 300 gold, 6 times the cost of forging the Conqueror's armor. Because of this, Shifeng had only dared to produce a few sets for Zero Wing's main force members. However, things had changed. Not only did he now have the dark gold ranked black steel insignia, but he also had the tier 3 purple thunder flame. His success rate for forging the fine gold ranked magic light set had risen to 55%, but that wasn't the most important factor. During his trip to the Boneless Land, he had acquired a large amount of Eternium ore, which he could use to make Magisteel ingots. Aside from increasing forging success rate, Magisteel ingots could increase fine gold weapons and equipment's basic attributes. After reaching his special forging room, Shifeng began to refine Eternium ore with the purple thunder flame, transforming the ore into Magisteel ingots. The purple thunder flame increased the Magisteel ingot's purity far more than an ordinary flame could. As a result, The magisteel ingots he created offered a much greater boost to forging success rates. Originally, the magisteel ingot only increased forging success rate by 5%, but the ingots Shifeng had created could increase his forging success rate by 7%. Very quickly, Shifeng smelted the 1,000+ pieces of eternium ore into 1,000+ magisteel ingots. Shifeng then rapidly refined the materials he needed to forge the magic light set equipment. Now that his control had improved and he had the help of the purple thunderflame, his refining and forging speed had visibly increased. An hour later, a complete magic light set glistened before Shifeng's eyes, radiating a mesmerizing glow. This should be a success, right? Shifeng wondered as he gazed at the immaculate magic light set before him. He then clicked to inspect the set's attribute panel. Chapter 1635, Mana Tower constructed. Chapter 1635, Mana Tower constructed. Chapter 1635, Mana Tower constructed. Each attempt to forge the magic light set cost 300 gold, which meant that each failure also cost 300 gold. Not even super guilds would play around with so much money. If not for his considerably high success rate, Shifeng wouldn't have dared to attempt the set's mass production. When Shifeng clicked to inspect the magic light set's attribute panel, a system notification appeared. System: Magic light set has been successfully forged. Forging proficiency increased by 15 points. Obtained 6 million EXP. Its attributes sure have improved considerably. Shifeng was delighted when he saw the set's attributes. Level 50 fine gold set equipment was best players could hope for at this stage of the game, since level 50 dark gold equipment only dropped from super large scale team dungeons. Moreover, the drop rate wasn't 100%. With the inclusion of the magisteel ingot, the fine gold ranked magic light set's basic attributes had received a 10% boost. Although it didn't seem like much, level 50 fine gold equipment generally offered over 100 points to each attribute. A 10% increase meant at least 10 more points. Meanwhile, the magic light set was a 6-piece set, offering 60 bonus points to each attribute. Furthermore, the magisteel ingot improved every basic attribute. Overall, the 10% improvement was the equivalent of an additional piece of level 50 secret silver equipment. Aside from epic equipment and above, no equipment could rival the magic light set at this stage of the game. Unfortunately, epic items were extremely rare, and not even guild's peak experts were guaranteed to wield one. If he let Zero Wings experts equip the magic light set, they'd definitely have an overwhelming advantage over other guilds' experts in basic attributes. Although the magic light set did not boost the wearer's combat standards, it offered far more destructive power than the Conqueror's armor's basic strength battle array. Rather than rely on superior combat standards to whittle down their enemies, Zero Wings experts could trample over their opponents by relying on the magic light set. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng began to forge the next magic light set. Very quickly, Shifeng finished 3 more forging attempts. Among them, 1 was a complete failure, while 2 had succeeded. Shifeng's success rate even surprised him. As Shifeng was about to continue, Melancholic Smile contacted him. Guild leader, the Mana Tower you've requested has been built in Zero Wing City, but it needs too many magic crystals to operate every day. Should we activate it now? Melancholic Smile asked worriedly. Not only had they spent 5,000 gold to construct the Mana Tower, but they had also spent 5,000 pieces of mana ore. She had assumed that the Mana Tower would bring in additional income for Zero Wing City, but once it had been constructed, she had discovered that activating it cost 3,000 magic crystals, and its continued operation would cost 1,500 magic crystals per day. This was a significant expenditure to any guild, especially Zero Wing. Although the 4 Towers of Elements' teleportation function and Zero Wing's battle arenas had earned the guild some magic crystals, they couldn't afford to squander what they had. It's fine. Activate it, Shifeng said, chuckling. The Mana Tower was the symbol of a guild city. Zero Wing City could only be called a true guild city once it had a Mana Tower of its own. The Mana Tower increased the mana density in a city significantly. The 5 magic towers' increased mana density wasn't even the equivalent to 1/3 of the increase a single mana tower provided. Moreover, more NPCs would only reside in a guild city once it had a mana tower. This was especially true for high-tiered NPCs since they had such strict mana density requirements. Right, once you've activated the mana tower, notify Aqua and have her raise the entrance fee to 60 copper. Increase the prices for the Battle Arena's services by 30% as well, Shifeng instructed. Naturally, they needed to increase prices in various aspects with the increased mana density. After all, the rise would offer players more benefits. This melancholic smile was stunned. It had not been easy to increase Zero Wing City's player population to 2 million. It might not be an issue if they increased the prices of the city's services a little, but players would definitely refuse such massive leaps. Zero Wing City's player traffic would doubtlessly decrease. Relax. Once the mana tower is active, Zero Wing City will be worth the price, Shifeng explained briefly. Of course, he understood Melancholic Smile's concerns. However, Melancholic Smile still had her doubts, but she still sent a subordinate to activate the mana tower. Following which, she notified Aqua Rose about the city's price increases. When Aqua Rose received the message, she even wondered if Shifeng were joking. Their 30 copper entrance fee had already elicited quite a few complaints, yet Shifeng wanted to double it. At this stage of the game, ordinary players only earned several silver coins per day after deducting repair fees. Including the expensive teleportation fee to travel to Zero Wing City, ordinary players would likely struggle to justify paying a 60 copper entrance fee. Furthermore, Zero Wing City wasn't located anywhere close to level 50 high-resource maps. Hence, the city's double EXP buff held little attraction to ordinary players. However, as Aqua Rose considered such issues, she felt the city's mana density rise rapidly. Even players who weren't sensitive to mana could clearly feel the increase. Naturally, they gained more mental clarity, as well. What's going on? Why do I feel so refreshed? Why has the city's mana density suddenly increased? What? The city's mana density has at least doubled. What did Zero Wing do? Quick, look. The mana density isn't the only thing that has increased. The accumulation rate for the double EXP buff has also risen. Now, we can accumulate 20% of the double EXP buff just by standing on the street for 24 hours. The players resting in Zero Wing City quickly discovered the new changes, and they all fell into heated discussions about them. Naturally, some of them published the changes to the official forums. At the same time, Zero Wing announced that it had increased Zero Wing City's entrance fee to 60 copper, which caused a huge commotion across Star Moon Kingdom. Crap. Is Zero Wing that desperate for money? They're charging 60 copper just to enter the city each time. That is daylight robbery. You can't put it like that. Right now, you can accumulate 20% of the double EXP buff just by standing on Zero Wing City streets for 24 hours. That's just as effective as resting in a guild residence's 1-star private rooms. Do you know how much it costs to rent a private room in a guild? 60 copper is definitely cheap. Indeed. I just checked into a hotel in Zero Wing City, and the new benefits are simply amazing. Not only can I accumulate 30% of the double EXP buff in 24 hours, but I also got an energized buff that increases my maximum stamina by 10% for 4 hours. Moreover, the buff only takes effect after I leave the city. A 10% increase to maximum stamina for 4 hours? That's basically a free stamina potion. I've decided. I'm going to Zero Wing City to rest from now on. That's not the only thing that's changed. I've heard that Zero Wing City's teleportation function can cover a larger distance now. Now, you can teleport into the Orc Empire from Zero Wing City. At first, everyone had been disgruntled about the increased prices for Zero Wing City's services, but after learning about the new benefits the city offered, the number of players willing to rest in Zero Wing City skyrocketed. This was especially true for the adventurer teams that planned to explore the Orc Empire. While ordinary players might consider the teleportation function expensive, the fee was no problem for adventurer teams. To them, time was more important. With the amount of time they saved, They could defeat more bosses, complete more quests, and earn more contribution points. They could easily earn back their teleportation fees and more. In the end, Zero Wing City's player population shot from 2 million to 3 million in less than an hour after the guild implemented the new changes. At this point, the city even felt a little crowded. Chapter 1636 Zero Wing City's Rise. Chapter 1636 Zero Wing City's Rise. Chapter 1636 Zero Wing City's Rise. The rapid increase in Zero Wing City's player population had surprised Aqua Rose, who had assumed that it would decrease. Not only did the sudden addition of 1 million players bring in another 6,000 gold in entrance fees to Zero Wing City, but plenty of players also rushed to use the city's teleportation function. To save on teleportation fees, the various adventurer teams visiting Zero Wing City had also bought memberships for the teleportation services, each earning Zero Wing 20 magic crystals. In one short hour since the guild implemented the new changes to the city, over 4,000 players had bought a membership, bringing in over 80,000 magic crystals. There were even more players interested in teleporting to the Orc Empire. Due to the increased teleportation distance, non-members had to pay 30 silver for each maximum range teleportation. Even after deducting the teleportation cost, Zero Wing still earned 18 silver from each traveling player. During the past hour, over 6,000 non-members had teleported to the Orc Empire, handing over 1,000 gold to Zero Wing. Aqua Rose and Melancholic Smile were stupefied. Previously, Melancholic Smile had worried that they wouldn't be able to earn back the cost of the Mana Tower, but the city's teleportation function alone had raked in over 1,000 gold. The function alone made money faster than the candlelight trading firm as a whole, not to mention the amount of magic crystals the service raked in. Moreover, the number of players using the teleportation function and registering for membership continued to increase. Guild leader, where did you obtain this Mana Tower? It is simply amazing, Aqua Rose said excitedly. With its profit speed, we can easily cover our daily expenditures. We won't have anything to fear, even if we continue to duke it out with Heaven's Burial for another 2 weeks. She had agonized over Zero Wing's lack of funds. The increased bounty had skyrocketed the guild's daily expenditures, but now, she didn't need to worry about the issue. This is only the beginning. Later, I'll store the weapons and equipment I've recently acquired in the guild warehouse. Everyone can trade for the items. Since our guild members have suffered so greatly, give our members in Starmoon Kingdom some bonus GCPs. Normal members get 50 points, elite members get 200 points, and core members get 500 points, Shifeng said, laughing. With the Mana Tower and the 4 Towers of Elements, Zero Wing City should have no problem reaching a player population of 5 million in the near future. At that time, the city should easily earn 30,000 gold off of entrance fees alone. Furthermore, there would be profit from the shop rentals, hotel fees, battle arena, and other revenue sources. Guild leader, won't it be a little much to give out so many GCPs at once? Aqua Rose could not help but gasp when Shifeng told her to award so many GCPs to their guild members. Although the value of Zero Wing's GCPs had recently decreased, each point was still worth nearly 20 copper. Giving normal members 50 GCPs would be the equivalent of handing them 10 silver each, elite members would receive 40 silver, and core members would receive 1 gold. Although this didn't seem like much, Zero Wing had a lot of members in Starmoon Kingdom. The total cost would easily reach more than 100,000 gold. Although players couldn't exchange these points for coins, there weren't many weapons and pieces of equipment in the guild warehouse available for purchase. It's fine. Our members have worked hard lately. Moreover, who says our guild doesn't have any weapons and equipment? Shifeng said, chuckling. However, he did not bother to explain further. Instead, he sent Yu Zipping a message, instructing him and the others to deposit the weapons and equipment they had obtained during their visit to the Boneless Land into the guild warehouse after disconnecting the call with Aqua Rose. They had obtained over 6,000 level 55 plus pieces of equipment from all of the demonic creatures they had slain in the Boneless Land. Although the majority of the items were bronze rank, there were several hundred pieces of mysterious iron equipment and dozens of pieces of secret silver equipment. Meanwhile, Shifeng's statement has confused Aqua Rose. She had no idea what Shifeng planned to do about this situation. However, she followed his instructions and published the announcement on the guild's notice board. Very quickly, this announcement caused a commotion in the guild chat. Vice Guild Leader, is this true? The guild is actually awarding us so many GCPs. Doesn't the guild lack funds right now? If the guild gives us so many points, what will it do about coins? Many of the guild members were surprised by Shifeng's generosity. Although each player only received a small reward, the total cost of giving all of them bonus GCPs, with how many members the guild had, would be massive. In reality, the guild didn't need to reward its members. Many were already satisfied with the benefits the new residents in Zero Wing City offered after the mana tower had been constructed. Now, due to the increased mana density in the city, members could accumulate 25% of the double EXP buff after resting for 20 hours in the guild hall, 35% if they rented a private room. Moreover, players would even accumulate the buff while they were offline. This sudden improvement had skyrocketed the guild members' morale. Their confidence in Zero Wing's future had not only returned, but increased. The biggest problem players faced in God's domain was leveling up. Unfortunately, the constant fighting with Heaven's Burial had severely affected Zero Wing members' leveling speeds. In fact, some members were losing levels faster than they could recover them. However, now that they could accumulate the double EXP buff so quickly, regaining their lost levels would be much easier. In contrast, Heaven's Burial's members didn't enjoy such a benefit. If this war continued, Zero Wing's members would definitely surpass Heaven's Burial's members in levels. No need to worry. This is a direct command from the guild leader. Moreover, the guild leader has said that since everyone is still willing to believe in Zero Wing will not mistreat any of you. Aqua Rose explained in the guild chat. Inwardly, though, she had no confidence in her words in the least. All hail the guild leader, all hail Zero Wing. Hearing Aqua Rose's words, Zero Wing's members cheered. After everyone received their bonus points, many players ran to the guild warehouse to purchase items. When they saw the available items, however, they were stupefied. All sorts of weapons and equipment had been put up for purchase in the guild warehouse. All of the items were at least level 55, there were even level 65 items available. There were easily over 6,000 items in total. Currently, even level 50 equipment was incredibly difficult to obtain, not to mention level 55 plus weapons and equipment. Although none of them could use these level 55 plus weapons and equipment at present, at the very least, they wouldn't have to worry about weapons or equipment once they reached level 55. This was especially true for the guild's normal and elite members. Level 50 plus equipment were extremely difficult to obtain, and being able to purchase a set of up-to-date bronze and mysterious iron equipment as soon as they reached the appropriate level would be a dream for these players. Meanwhile, news that Zero Wing was giving away a ton of bonus GCPs and had thousands of level 55 plus weapons and pieces of equipment spread to Star Moon Kingdom's various large guilds. The various guilds had assumed that Zero Wing had reached its limits and was close to crumbling. They had expected the guild to play such a hand so suddenly. There was also Zero Wing City's recent rise to fame. No matter how they looked at the situation, Zero Wing did not seem like a guild that was nearing its end. In fact, Zero Wing grew stronger by the minute. When Singular Burial received news of this, he was stupefied. Chapter 1637 Astronomical Auction. Chapter 1637 Astronomical Auction. Chapter 1637 Astronomical Auction. Heaven's Burial wasn't the only guild caught off guard by Zero Wing's sudden transformation. All of the various large guilds were astonished. They hadn't realized that Zero Wing had such a solid foundation. This was especially true regarding the Mana Tower in Zero Wing City. The construction had skyrocketed the mana density in the city, making the already attractive city even more popular among players. Now, the various powers and players that had originally believed Zero Wing's downfall had been inevitable began to see a little hope for the guild. Who would have thought Zero Wing could still make such a move? Now, thanks to the Mana Tower, Zero Wing City's player population has gone through the ceiling. With this, the city's income will drastically increase. It seems that Heaven's Burial won't be able to wear Zero Wing down in a short amount of time. That's definitely true. Based on what I've heard, over 5,000 additional players have secured teleportation memberships in Zero Wing City since the guild implemented the new changes. Indeed. The number of orcs guarding the Orc Empire's borders continues to increase, and the borders are becoming even more difficult to cross. The distance is a huge problem as well. By teleporting straight into the Orc Empire's outer region from Zero Wing City, players can save over 10 hours of travel time. They won't have to worry about Orc patrol squads ambushing them, either. The only problem is the expensive teleportation fee. It's not affordable for ordinary players like us. When discussing Zero Wing City's enhanced teleportation function, whether they were members of the various major powers or independent players, they all wore hungry expressions. At this point, the Orc Empire had become a gathering point for multiple kingdoms and 2 empires. However, the journey there was still a problem that plagued all of the players who wanted to visit the Orc Empire. Unlike Heaven's Burial's members, who could teleport to Ancient Rock City directly, other players had to travel for a minimum of 10 hours just to get from their respective countries to the Orc Empire's outer region. To make matters worse, they could only grind in the area for a limited time before they had to return to a city or town to rest due to the Empire's poor environment. Although there were guild towns and a guild city within the Orc Empire, these places had a limited number of hotels. There wasn't nearly enough accommodation for every player adventuring in the Orc Empire. This meant that the majority of the players visiting the Orc Empire were forced to return to their country's NPC cities to rest, spending another 10 or so hours to travel back to the Orc Empire. However, Zero Wing City had changed everything. Not only could players save precious time while traveling across the Orc Empire's borders, but they could also circle around the powerful Orc patrol squads and mutated orcs. Because of this, the number of players who gathered in Zero Wing City continued to increase. The only problem these players had to face was the money they'd have to spend to get to the Empire. There was also the matter of traveling to Zero Wing City. Although players could teleport to Zero Wing City via Evernight City, they still had to cross quite a distance to get from Starmoon City to Evernight City. Fortunately, this problem was practically negligible compared to the potential benefits of saving so much time during their travels. As a result, the various major powers and adventurer teams that hadn't initially been interested in Zero Wing's latest auction rushed to Stone Forest Town's Zero Wing auction house. Currently, despite there still being over an hour before the auction officially began, players already crowded into the spacious advanced auction house, many of which were members of the various large guilds. There were also plenty of well-known adventurer teams from the multiple kingdoms and 2 empires that neighbored the Orc Empire. Big Sis Aqua, more than 50,000 players have already arrived to participate in the auction. At this rate, we might even have 70,000 participants by the time the auction starts, Yaya said excitedly as she read the statistics report in her hands. Although Zero Wing was about to host its auction, not just anyone could take part. They had to fulfill certain conditions first. If one wished to enter the auction venue, they needed a minimum of 100 gold in their bags. If one wished to use the VIP rooms, then they had to have a minimum of 10,000 gold. The advanced auction house was even larger than the Candlelight Trading Firm in White River City. Not only could the largest auction hall house 100,000 people, but it also had 100 VIP rooms. Even so, all of the VIP rooms had been claimed. When Aqua Rose saw the statistics, she, too, was shocked. Even Super Guild's auctions had trouble attracting such a colossal crowd. Aqua Rose finally understood why Shifeng had said that this was only the beginning. With so many people contesting for Zero Wing City's private houses and shops, it would be strange if these properties did not fetch a high price. Following which, time passed quickly. Under Aqua Rose's guidance, Zero Wing's auction began smoothly. Although this was an impromptu auction, the available items were still of considerable quality, all of which were quite valuable to guilds and players. In fact, Zero Wing even intended to offer plenty of level 45 dark gold and level 50 secret silver equipment. Next up is our auction's first finale item, Zero Wing City's private houses. The first private house is located behind Zero Wing City's battle arena. The starting bid will be 1,500 gold, with each increment being no less than 50 gold. As Aqua Rose, the auction's host, finished speaking, the crowd stirred. The players in the VIP rooms, in particular, who had, thus far, shown no interest in the items for auction, stared longingly at the image on the large display above the stage. Crap. Zero Wing actually dares to ask for such a price. Even the private houses in major NPC cities don't cost 1,500 gold. Is Zero Wing that desperate for money? Many of the players present were shocked by the minimum bid Aqua Rose had stated. The private houses in NPC cities with player populations in the millions only sold for around 1,000 gold. A few of the private houses in strategic locations only sold for a little more than that. Meanwhile, players didn't have to worry about attacks or sieges in NPC cities, but it was a different story for a guild city. There was no telling when another major power would attempt to take the city for itself. Zero Wing was simply insane for trying to sell an unstable private house for such a high price. Honestly, even Aqua Rose considered the price somewhat high, but Shifeng had determined the minimum bid 1,500 gold and not a coin lower. Hence, she had no choice but to go along with his wishes. However, after the auction's guests discussed the private houses in hushed tones, voices began to echo throughout the auction hall one after another as they began to place their bids. 1,600 gold. 1,700 gold. 1,800 gold. The rapidly increasing prices flabbergasted everyone. After a short moment, the price had risen to 2,200 gold. The bids only slowed after reaching this point. In the end, Remnant Cloud, the commander of the Firecloud Fox Adventurer team, won the first private house for 2,550 gold. Because of the winning bid, the spectating major powers envied Zero Wing. A single private house barely took up any of a city's land, yet Zero Wing had earned so much money from a single private house. At the same time, many of them pitted Remnant Cloud for his foolish decision. Although Zero Wing's situation had improved significantly, its chances of defeating Heaven's Burial were still slim. Purchasing a private house for so much money was foolish. However, as the various large guilds' upper echelons entertained such thoughts, the second private house sold for 2,700 gold. In total, Zero Wing had sold 15 private houses. Every one of them had sold, with the cheapest going for 2,450 gold and the most expensive earning 2,800 gold. The price could already rival that of high-potential lands in NPC cities. As for Zero Wing City's shops, the minimum bid was a frightening 5,000 gold, with each increment being no less than 100 gold. In the end, of the 5 shops that had sold, the cheapest sold for 7,800 gold, while the most expensive one had gone for 8,500 gold. During this single auction, Zero Wing had gained a net profit of more than 120,000 gold. When Aqua Rose saw the final numbers, she even wondered if she were dreaming. Guild leader, with this much money, we can purchase a large amount of level 45 equipment and replenish our warehouse. We can definitely help our guild members recover their full strength. Aqua Rose's eyes glistened when she saw the profits the auction had raked in. It had been a long time since she had seen so much money. No. Set the guild warehouse's replenishment aside for now. First, prioritize the NPC shop's construction, Shifeng said, shaking his head. He had never intended to sell Zero Wing's precious lands just to help the guild's members recover their lost weapons and equipment. Although the guild members' items were quite important, they paled in comparison to the NPC merchants' shops. NPC shops were the lifeblood of a guild city. Only after gaining NPC shops could a guild city start its endless cycle of development. I understand. I'll get to it immediately. Hearing Shifeng's words, Aqua Rose recalled the NPC merchants that had visited Zero Wing City to discuss business. Due to the guild's lack of funds, they had delayed the NPC shop's construction, but now that the guild had money to spare, it was indeed time to address the issue. Chapter 1638, 3-star NPC Shop. Chapter 1638, 3-star NPC Shop. Chapter 1638, 3-star NPC Shop. Starmoon Kingdom, Zero Wing City. Since there was no need for players to construct NPC shops personally, tall buildings began to rise in Zero Wing City as soon as Aqua Rose made the necessary payments. The shop's 2-star NPC merchants required usually only had 2 or 3 floors, costing between 500 and 1,000 gold to construct. As for the shops for the 2 3-star NPC merchants, one had 5 floors, while the other had 6 floors. Each had cost over 2,000 gold to construct. 15 minutes after Aqua Rose made the payments, the NPC shops were complete. The added buildings made Zero Wing City look far more prosperous. The 2 3-star NPC merchants' shops, which were both located in the heart of Zero Wing City, were particularly eye-catching. The architecture of these shops was even more gorgeous than the candlelight trading firm. One could tell that these 2 shops were extraordinary at a glance. Meanwhile, one of the shops functioned as a grocery store, while the other focused on magic. When did these 2 NPC shops get here? These buildings are so extravagant. Quick, let's go in and take a look. Many passers-by quickly took notice of the 2 NPC shops in Zero Wing City's central district, and they couldn't help but take a closer look. When these players entered the shops, they were stunned by what they saw. Each of the 2 shops offered all kinds of items, some of which couldn't even be found in Kingdom's capital cities. Moreover, many items, which they had never seen before, were on display in crystal cabinets. Isn't this a complete set of basic magic array scrolls? You can actually find something like this in a shop. Crap. This is a Tier 1 AoE attack magic scroll. Amazing. This is a bronze pickaxe. If I had, my mining efficiency would increase like crazy. What? This shop even has basic traps. Everyone's eyes nearly fell from their sockets when they saw the items on display in the dozens of crystal cabinets in the magic store's first-floor hall. Basic magic arrays were rare on the market, mostly because it was extremely difficult to collect a complete set. Normally, only the various large guilds were capable of collecting a complete set. To independent players and adventurer teams, basic magic arrays were treasures that they could only gaze at longingly. The Tier 1 magic scrolls were also extremely rare and could save players' lives during critical moments. The basic traps were also considerably effective against both players and monsters. Every one of these items was incredibly scarce on the market, yet they were actually for sale in these NPC shops. Moreover, the items' prices were slightly lower than market price. Quick! Notify the commander. We must get this basic magic array no matter what. Hello, guild leader. I just found some bronze tools in a grocery store in Zero Wing City. For a time, the players visiting the 2 3-star NPC merchants' shops busily contacted their companions or superiors, reporting the shop's available items. What? Zero Wing City actually has such shops? I'll have someone bring the money immediately. Keep an eye on those items. The various major powers' upper echelons were wrought with desire over the new NPC shops in Zero Wing City. They promptly issued commands to acquire these items, no matter the cost. In less than 10 minutes, the 2 NPC shops were overcrowded with players, becoming even more popular than the candlelight trading firm. News of these NPC shops quickly spread throughout Starmoon Kingdom. Many players might not regard the double EXP buff as important or have any interest in the Orc Empire, but every player was interested in obtaining rare items. This was especially true for tools that could help players defeat powerful monsters, such as Tier 1 magic scrolls and basic magic arrays. Usually, only guilds had the opportunity to use such items. They couldn't simply be purchased with enough money. After acquiring these tools, players could take down powerful monsters they previously had to avoid. Guild leader, now that every NPC merchant has begun their shop's operation, shouldn't we purchase some of their products for ourselves? Although Aqua Rose had known about the NPC shop's products, she couldn't ignore the temptation now that they were available for purchase. Some of the rare items in these shops were even rare in capital cities' auction houses. If they purchased these items and sold them in Zero Wing's auction house, they'd make a huge profit. No need. Rather than trying to make a profit through resale, attracting more players to Zero Wing City is more important, Shifeng said, chuckling. He could sympathize with Aqua Rose's desire, but doing so would be penny-wise and pound-foolish. NPC shops were a guild city's lifeblood because they sold rare items every day, which attracted a constant stream of players to the city, increasing its popularity. The increased popularity would then help boost the city's various revenue sources. The resulting additional entry fees alone would outstrip the profits they could earn from reselling the NPC shop's items. After giving the matter some thought, Aqua Rose saw the reasoning in Shifeng's decision. Less than half an hour after the NPC shop's grand opening, they had attracted over 300,000 more players to Zero Wing City. That was more than 1,800 gold in entrance fees. As time passed, even more players would visit Zero Wing City, and at this rate, there was no need to resell items. Right, pull out some funds to purchase these materials. Buy as many of them as you can as long as the prices aren't more than 10% higher than market value. Once you have them, send all of the materials to me, Shifeng instructed after examining the materials he had left to forge the magic light set. Although he had Melancholic Smile gradually collect the necessary materials, the cost was simply too high. Overall, Melancholic Smile had only managed to purchase around 100 sets of materials for him. Now that Zero Wing had funds to spare, he needed as many materials as possible. All right. I'll send someone to purchase them immediately. When Aqua Rose saw the list of materials Shifeng required, she was slightly astonished. However, now that Zero Wing City's income soared, she was confident in acquiring a large stock. Orc Empire, Ancient Rock City. The atmosphere in the guild leader's office in Heaven's Burial's residence was extraordinarily tense. What is going on with Zero Wing? Is some major corporation supporting it in secret? Singular Burial grumbled, greatly displeased with the latest status report on the rival guild. At the same time, he felt an immense pressure bear down on him. Not long ago, it had been obvious that Zero Wing was about to crumble. Yet, it was now full of vim and vigor. In fact, the guild was doing so well that it had even awarded over 100,000 gold in bonus GCPs. The large number of NPC shops that had recently risen in Zero Wing City was even more impressive. Singular Burial couldn't help but wonder if Zero Wing were somehow growing richer as the guild fought Heaven's Burial. Guild leader, our people are keeping a constant eye on this matter, but we haven't discovered any major corporation supporting Zero Wing from the shadows. Blackwater has also confirmed this, Daybreak Fog said, shaking her head as she answered Singular Burial with absolute certainty. We are sure that Zero Wing's recent income stems from Zero Wing City. Zero Wing City? Singular Burial's expression darkened when he read the statistics report on the guild city. Although he hated to acknowledge it, Zero Wing City had far more potential than he had expected. He had never thought that a guild city could develop so quickly, nearly surpassing Ancient Rock City. This is interesting. It would seem that Zero Wing's foundations are much sturdier than we imagined, Lei Jingyang, who currently sat nearby, commented, laughing. However, this is all they can accomplish. Since they refuse to surrender, can we now take action? Indeed. Young Master Lei, you can use the evil demon army to obliterate Zero Wing. Singular Burial nodded. Sneering, he continued, it's about time we show them how frightening our evil demon army truly is. Chapter 1639, Start of the War. Chapter 1639, Start of the War. Chapter 1639, Start of the War. Starmoon Kingdom, White River City. Due to Zero Wing City's sudden rise in fame, many independent players from the neighboring kingdoms had gathered before Zero Wing's residence in White River City, hoping to join the guild. Although Zero Wing didn't fare so well against Heaven's Burial right now, it was only a matter of time before Zero Wing City surpassed Heaven's Burial's Ancient Rock City at the rate it was developing. Zero Wing City's teleportation function and numerous NPC shops were so attractive that even independent players and well-known adventurer teams considered settling down, long-term, in the city. Currently, many adventurer teams and guilds deeply regretted not participating in the auction for Zero Wing City's private houses. Some adventurer teams and guilds had even offered to purchase Zero Wing City's private houses for a much higher price, but unfortunately, no one was willing to hand over the private houses they had won in the auction. While Zero Wing gained more momentum, Chiffon continued to forge Magic Light sets. The Magic Light set was a 6-piece, level 50 fine-gold set equipment. Its forging procedures were extremely complex and difficult to accomplish. However, as Chiffon completed more sets, he became increasingly familiar with the forging process. With the help of the Purple Thunder Flame, he needed even less time to complete each set. Normally, a master forger would need nearly an hour to complete one attempt. Chiffon, on the other hand, only needed around 40 minutes now. Moreover, his practical success rate had risen to 60%, he could successfully forge 6 sets out of 10 attempts. Due to Chiffon's familiarity with the forging process, most of the remaining 40% only had a few minor defects, coming out as either secret silver or mysterious iron rank. Only 10% of the failures were unusable. While the secret silver and mysterious iron sets were considered failures, the pieces were still valuable to level 50 expert players. Furthermore, the failures still retained their set effects, which made them half a rank stronger than ordinary equipment of the same rank. Since Chiffon had no intention of keeping the Magic Light sets a secret, he dropped the failures in the guild warehouse and only kept the successful sets on him. As Chiffon prepared for his 27th attempt, Aqua Rose contacted him. Guild leader, Heaven's Burial has made a move. Currently, Heaven's Burial's Lei Jingyang is leading a massive number of evil beasts and expert players to attack our members in the 4 high-resource maps. We're too outnumbered. We simply can't hold them back. We've already lost a lot of expert members. Although I've already ordered a temporary retreat, it seems that Heaven's Burial had prepared for that. Our members won't be able to get out easily, Aqua Rose anxiously reported as she sent Chiffon a few videos. Each of the recordings displayed Heaven's Burial's expert teams leading 20 to 30 Lord ranked and above evil demons. Although the evil demons did not have as much HP as evil beasts of the same rank, they possessed superior intellect. A single level 70 Lord ranked evil demon was more than capable of cornering a 20-man team of ordinary experts, let alone 30 of them. Any of Zero Wing's 100-man expert teams would be basically annihilated if they came across these evil demons. Only 1,000-man teams might have some hope of resistance. At this point, only the 100-man teams under the Conqueror Party's leadership or those led by the guild's Tier 2 experts could defeat Heaven's Burial's expert teams. However, Heaven's Burial had sent over 5,000 evil demons to hunt down Zero Wing's members. The Conqueror Parties and Tier 2 experts weren't enough to keep the enemy teams in check. In the half an hour since the attacks had begun, Zero Wing had suffered over 5,000 casualties. Heaven's Burial really is cautious. Chiffon could not help his frown. If Star Moon Kingdom's armies discovered the evil god's temple's forces in their territory, they'd immediately move to destroy them. Due to the Orc Empire's invasion, Star Moon Kingdom's armies were spread across the kingdom. It'd be very easy to take advantage of the kingdom's power to deal with Heaven's Burial. However, Heaven's Burial had only sent their high-mobility evil demons to attack. Moreover, these evil demons had spread out. Even if the kingdom's armies reached them in time, they'd only be able to kill a few before the rest of the evil demons escaped. It was practically impossible to deal a heavy blow to this evil demon army. Moreover, the evil demon army was particularly skilled in guerrilla warfare. Players had no hope against them, let alone a single guild. This was also why the evil god's temple had very nearly wiped out an entire empire in Chiffon's previous life. When Zero Wing had clashed with the evil demon and beast armies previously, the guild had held the terrain advantage. It had also had the help of defensive magic arrays, defense turrets, NPC guards and soldiers, and other such tools, but now Zero Wing had none of that. As long as the evil demon army continued to hunt players in the fields, Zero Wing's members wouldn't be able to grind and level up. Ha ha ha. Boss Lei, these evil demons are amazing. Not even Zero Wing's expert teams can hold a candle to these monsters, a burly ranger exclaimed, laughing as he watched the evil demons crush a 100-man expert team from Zero Wing a short distance away. With just 40 evil demons, they had forced a Conqueror Party-led expert team to retreat. He had never thought this situation would be possible. Keep a close eye on them. Make sure none of them escape, Lei Jingyang said, laughing. He, on the other hand, wasn't surprised in the least. He had personally fought a great lord-ranked evil demon before. Without a berserk skill, he was no match for the evil demon, barely able to defend himself. If a group of evil demons ganged up on him, even an expert of his caliber would quickly fall. Although Zero Wing had stood toe-to-toe with Heaven's Burial in this war of attrition thus far, the outcome had been determined long ago. Zero Wing never had a chance of victory. Meanwhile, news that Heaven's Burial had dispatched an evil demon army against Zero Wing quickly reached the major powers. Seeing the numerous evil demons spread across the high-resource maps Zero Wing's members occupied, even Super Guild's upper echelons couldn't help but frown. It seems that Heaven's Burial has gathered a powerful evil demon army. Even with Zero Wing City's rise in popularity, Zero Wing's legacy will soon end. Yuan Taishan could not help his rueful sigh as he read the latest report on the war between Zero Wing and Heaven's Burial. According to the report, Heaven's Burial had dispatched 20 Grand Lord-ranked evil demons to Starmoon Kingdom. Every one of these Grand Lords was an absolute nightmare for players. The guild had also dispatched 500 Great Lords and thousands of Lord-ranked evil demons. This army would be invincible in the fields. Starmoon Kingdom's NPC armies were the only hope of exterminating these monsters now. Unfortunately, by the time the kingdom's armies arrived, the evil demons would have likely escaped. Had Zero Wing agreed to the secret pavilion's conditions, there might be a solution to this problem, but the guild had lost any possibility of escaping this predicament. As Zero Wing's members retreated from the various high-resource maps, Heaven's Burial published a post on Starmoon Kingdom's official forums. Zero Wing, do you dare face us in a final stand? This sentence instantly caused an uproar in Starmoon Kingdom. Ha ha ha. It seems that Zero Wing really isn't much after all. It's even afraid of putting up a good fight. Zero Wing members, do you guys dare to come out and fight? Or are you going to continue to hide in your city? Heaven's Burial's members clamored on the forums, provoking Zero Wing's members to a fight in the fields. Naturally, Zero Wing's members were incredibly frustrated. Although they wanted to fight, they'd be surrounded by evil demons if they ventured into the fields. If that happened, they'd never survive, yet if they didn't fight, everyone in the game would look down on them. Guild leader, many of our members are voicing their desire to face Heaven's Burial's members due to the recent announcement. But if we let them, Aqua Rose trailed off helplessly. Is there really no way to deal with those evil demons? She found Heaven's Burial's actions truly disgusting, but if they didn't find a solution quickly, not only would Zero Wing's reputation plummet, but the guild's morale would also crumble. Does Heaven's Burial really think that Zero Wing is some helpless sheep? Since they want a fight, I'll give them a fight. Shifeng sneered. Chapter 1640, An Eye for an Eye, a Tooth for a Tooth. Chapter 1640, An Eye for an Eye, a Tooth for a Tooth. Chapter 1640, An Eye for an Eye, a Tooth for a Tooth. We're going to fight them? Anticipation filled Aqua Rose when she heard Shifeng's growl. Guild leader, do you really have a way to deal with those evil demons? She was very familiar with Zero Wing's foundations. With the guild's current combat power, they had no chance of victory against Heaven's Burial in the open fields. If they wanted to win, they needed some special strategy or a miracle. Nope, Shifeng said, shaking his head. Then how are we supposed to fight Heaven's Burial? Shifeng's simple response dumbfounded Aqua Rose. Who says we're going to fight them head-on? Shifeng asked, revealing a faint smile. A guild war is a competition of wealth. If we cut off their income, how long do you think they'll last? Both guilds had already set bounties on each other's members and incurred massive expenditures each day because of it. If one side suddenly lacked the funds to pay for the massive number of bounty claims and couldn't compensate its guild members, that guild would crumble under the pressure. Cut off their income? Aqua Rose gave her guild leader a confused look. Heaven's Burial's financial ability was frightening. Not only was it backed by the Blackwater Corporation, but it could also lean on the Orc Empire's ancient rock city for funds. If it were possible to cut off these sources, Heaven's Burial would suffer a devastating blow to its finances. However, no matter how Aqua Rose considered the situation, she couldn't find a way to do so. Ancient Rock City was located in the Orc Empire's inner region. Not only was it protected by Heaven's Burial's members, but the guild also continued to strengthen the city's static defenses. Every one of God's domain's various superpowers eyed the city, hoping for a chance to capture it. The guild had also stationed NPC soldiers within the city walls. Although Ancient Rock City only had around 6,000 NPC soldiers, everyone was level 100. The majority of them was also Tier 1 soldiers, with a minority of Tier 2 NPCs and a few Tier 3 commanders. Level 100 was the second major turning point in God's domain. Had these NPCs been present when Heaven's Burial had tried to capture the city, it would have failed even if it had employed thousands of level 70 evil beasts. Unfortunately, cutting off the income from the Blackwater Corporation was even less possible. Blackwater had already taken control of the Iron Empire, and with Zero Wing's current strength, attacking the guild in its own empire would be suicidal. In any case, have someone send me 60,000 magic crystals. I intend to visit Ancient Rock City and try to cut off Heaven's Burial's income from it. Also, inform our guild members to stay indoors for now. If they have to level up, they can do so in the maps around Zero Wing City. Have Flying Shadow, Shadow Sword, and the others offer reinforcement if our members come under attack, Shifeng instructed after nodding to Aqua Rose's question. None of the others had the power to deal with Ancient Rock City. Unfortunately for Heaven's Burial, he had obtained the Demon King's Horn, an epic consumable, during his trip to the World Summit. Even Zero Wing City's defensive magic array would shatter against a full-powered attack from a Tier 5 Demon King, not to mention Ancient Rock Cities. The Demon King's Horn's only flaw was its maddening requirement of magic crystals. Previously, Zero Wing hadn't even had 10,000 magic crystals in its warehouse, and Shifeng couldn't have afforded to use the Demon King's Horn. But things had changed for the guild. Zero Wing City alone earned more than 100,000 magic crystals through its teleportation services and battle arena, and the number continued to climb by the minute. Hence, taking 60,000 magic crystals would not harm Zero Wing's daily operations too much. Since Heaven's Burial dared pull such a stunt, Shifeng had to return the favor. As the saying went, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. When Aqua Rose heard that Shifeng planned to head to Ancient Rock City by himself, she panicked. Hurriedly, she argued, "Guild leader, it is too dangerous for you to go alone. There are level 100, Tier 3 NPCs guarding Ancient Rock City. Heaven's Burial has long since set Zero Wing as an enemy. The moment you approach the city, the NPCs will annihilate you. Every NPC soldier in Ancient Rock City was more than capable of slaughtering current players. Going there alone was suicidal. Relax. I know what I'm doing. If I really can't pull it off, I won't force the issue," Shifeng said, chuckling. He did not bother to explain further. "Then, you must be careful. I will have Yaya deliver the magic crystals right away," Aqua Rose repeatedly implored. Despite Shifeng telling her to relax, she could not help but worry. Following which, Aqua Rose had Yaya deliver 60,000 magic crystals to White River City's candlelight trading firm while she dealt with the guild members, instructing everyone to avoid going out as much as possible. Once Shifeng obtained the 60,000 magic crystals, he retrieved 2 Tier 3 defensive magic scrolls, which the guild's main force had acquired, from the guild warehouse before hurrying to Ancient Rock City. Orc Empire, Ancient Rock City. Due to the primordial divine ruin's appearance, high-level quests and powerful bosses had begun to spawn around the ruin. Because of this, many players had gathered in the area to compete for these resources. This also increased Ancient Rock City's player population. Though, the population increase was not as dramatic as that of Zero Wing City. Some of the new arrivals to Ancient Rock City were in awe of the city's numerous large buildings. Ancient Rock City contained various hotels, smithies, bars, and restaurants, and the shortest of these buildings included 3 floors, while the tallest even had 6 or 7. Ancient Rock City's prosperity could already rival major NPC cities. Moreover, the city's defenses were incredibly powerful. The city already had 28 defense turrets and dozens of arrow towers. The center of the city even housed 3 basic mana pulse cannons, which Heaven's Burial had purchased from Blackwing City. Even if an orc army attempted to siege the city, no one would expect the city to fall for even a second. When the various superpowers saw the city, they were forced to abandon the idea of capturing it. Ancient Rock City is truly an impenetrable fortress. With this city, it is only a matter of time before Heaven's Burial becomes a super first-rate guild. That's right. With the constant supply of funds from Ancient Rock City and the support from major corporations, many experts will likely attempt to join the guild. All Heaven's Burial needs now is time to develop. I know, right? I've heard that the evil demon army attacking Zero Wing right now also belongs to Heaven's Burial. You guys should see how powerful those evil demons are for yourselves. Ordinary experts are nothing before those Lord-ranked evil demons. Just one of them can easily wipe out a 20-man expert team, and the great Lord-ranked evil demons' combat standards can even rival ordinary experts. Even the various superpowers are afraid of Heaven's Burial now. If not for the other kingdoms and empires hunting down the evil demons, Zero Wing would have been annihilated already. Zero Wing sure is unlucky to have Heaven's Burial as an enemy. With this evil demon army against them, Zero Wing is finished. Although Zero Wing is not a weak guild by any means, it has crap luck to have crossed Heaven's Burial. I've heard that Heaven's Burial plans to recruit more members soon. Why don't we join Heaven's Burial after our meal? If we're late, it might become even more difficult to join the guild later. I guess you're right. Count me in. As the players in Ancient Rock City discussed Heaven's Burial, many expressed their admiration and envy. Heaven's Burial had both money and strength. It was only a matter of time before it took control of the several kingdoms neighboring the Orc Empire. Not even super guilds could stop the guild's growth now. Meanwhile, in Heaven's Burial's residence in Ancient Rock City, Singular Burial wore a delighted expression as he sat in his office. When he read the latest report, an indescribable joy filled his heart. So what if your city earns a lot of money, Black Flame? In the face of absolute power, what can you possibly do? Singular Burial laughed maniacally. After a series of battles, Heaven's Burial had killed over 15,000 Zero Wing members. Although most of them were normal members, it had been a significant blow to Zero Wing. At the moment, Zero Wing's members hid in towns and cities, most not daring to leave the safety to grind. Heaven's Burial immediately sent a team to kill any that did the moment they were discovered. Although some players had snuck past Heaven's Burial, they couldn't affect the overall situation. If this persisted, it wouldn't be long before Zero Wing's members began to withdraw from the guild. Once that happened, Zero Wing would truly be finished. As Singular Burial prepared to meet with his guild's upper echelons to discuss their next moves, Shifeng secretly snuck across Ancient Rock City's walls. Although Heaven's Burial had already set Zero Wing's members as enemies, Shifeng had the Nightwalker's cape equipped. If he wished to escape detection, not even Tier 3 NPCs would find him. The only problem was that he still wasn't allowed to enter the city. Fortunately, he didn't need to. As expected of one of the Orc Empire's cities. It's certainly more prosperous than Zero Wing City, Shifeng muttered to himself, smiling as he observed Ancient Rock City through its gates. It seems that Heaven's Burial has improved the city's defenses quite a bit. I wonder if it can withstand a Tier 5 large-scale destruction spell? As Shifeng muttered, he activated Gale Domain and flew above Ancient Rock City. Chapter 1641, Demon King's Descent. Chapter 1641, Demon King's Descent. Chapter 1641, Demon King's Descent. 20-meter-tall walls surrounded Ancient Rock City, strengthened by magic runes. Even powerful players would not be able to scale these walls. Furthermore, a defensive magic array protected Ancient Rock City, so even if players managed to climb the walls, the magic array would stop them in their tracks. Normally, players could only enter Ancient Rock City through its main entrance. If players with nefarious intentions couldn't even break past these two defenses, they'd have no hope of getting past the NPCs patrolling the city, and their attempts would be for naught. Due to the Orc Empire's unique environment, players consumed stamina and concentration more quickly in the area. The only way they could recover their lost stamina and concentration was to enter a magic array-enclosed town or city. Currently, a long line of players waited patiently outside of Ancient Rock City's main entrance. They would only be permitted entry after they had been inspected by the city's NPC soldiers. This inspection is really annoying. Heaven's Burial actually refuses to let cloaked players into the city and is adamant that we reveal our identities. They're likely afraid of players from enemy factions sneaking into the city. There are so many superpowers keeping an eye on Ancient Rock City, and if they decided to take action within the city's walls, Heaven's Burial's losses will be no laughing matter. They're overly worried. Causing trouble in Ancient Rock City is easier said than done. Plenty of NPC soldiers and players constantly patrol the city. If anyone does anything odd, they'll likely die before they can do any actual damage. Indeed. Heaven's Burial is just being too careful. With such powerful defenses, not even the super guilds can do anything to the city. As the players in line discussed Ancient Rock City's strict security, they all agreed that Heaven's Burial was being too sensitive. Ancient Rock City wasn't even under players' full control, and as a result, formidable NPCs guarded the city. Even if players wanted to attack the city, there was nothing they could do at this stage of the game. Guys, look. Someone's up there. Crap. Who is that? He's actually flying. What's he trying to do? He isn't trying to attack the city, is he? Attack the city? Are you kidding me? Ancient Rock City's defensive magic array isn't just for show. Current players can't go up against it. He must be trying to get a better look at the city's situation. Who is that guy? He sure has guts. Isn't he afraid that Heaven's Burial will try to kill him? When the crowd queued up to enter Ancient Rock City saw the figure in the sky, they couldn't help their growing curiosity. The players outside of Ancient Rock City weren't the only ones to notice Shafong. The players within the city's walls noticed him as well, and his appearance instantly caused a commotion. Meanwhile, in Heaven's Burial's residence, guild leader, someone has suddenly appeared above the city. By the looks of it, he seems to be a player, a level 49 ranger announced after entering the guild leader's office. Should we send the patrol squads to eliminate him? Normally, they didn't bother with players as long as they didn't try to cause any trouble. However, this unknown player dared to look down on Ancient Rock City from above. This was a blatant insult to Heaven's Burial. If they did not teach this player a lesson, it could impact the guild's prestige. Someone's looking down on the city from above. The Rangers report surprised Singular Burial slightly. Do you know who it is? This was the first time they had encountered such an arrogant player since Heaven's Burial had taken control of Ancient Rock City. We've tried to investigate, but he's wearing a black cloak, so we can't see the player's identity, the ranger said, shaking his head. Interesting. This person must be tired of life to act so wildly in Heaven's Burial's territory. Although I don't know what they intend to do, I don't want to see them leave this place alive. Notify our subordinates immediately and have them display the guild's strength, Singular Burial said, sneering as he looked at the cloaked image of Shafong. Understood. The ranger left to notify the NPC and player patrol squads to take action. Normally, NPC soldiers wouldn't take long to deal with an intruder when an enemy appeared in a city, but since this mysterious individual had hidden his identity and hadn't done anything just yet, they'd only be prevented from entering Ancient Rock City. The NPCs would not attempt to remove the player. However, these NPCs would launch an attack if they received a direct command. Current players were little more than flies to level 100 NPCs. Shortly after Singular Burial issued the command, the NPCs on the city walls set their sights on Shafong as he hovered above the city. One of the Tier 3 commanders immediately launched a Tier 3 spell, while the Tier 1 soldiers beside him pulled out their bows and fired at Shafong. It seems that Heaven's Burial is really angry. They actually commanded the NPCs to attack. That person is in for a beating. I know, right? It really makes you wonder what is going through that person's mind. Does he really think Ancient Rock City's NPC soldiers there for decoration? As everyone watched the Tier 3 spell and hundreds of arrows soar towards the hovering intruder, Shifeng finished his preparations. He then unfurled the Tier 3 defensive scroll in his hands and activated it. Immediately, dark blue streams of air danced around Shifeng, encasing him. Not only did the air streams strike the incoming arrows down, but they also blocked the Tier 3 spell. In the end, Shifeng emerged from the volley unscathed. What? He's still alive. Everyone was stunned when they saw Shifeng unharmed. Against a level 100, Tier 3 NPC's Tier 3 spell, even a player of the same rank and level would take significant damage. The other NPCs had also fired hundreds of arrows at Shifeng. Yet, despite such a domineering assault, Shifeng hadn't taken any damage. Contrary to expectations, Shifeng didn't try to escape after the NPC's first volley ended. Rather, he pulled an item from his bag. The instant he revealed this item, the surrounding mana surged towards Shifeng. As he began to chant an incantation, the mana around him concentrated into liquid. In seconds, a pitch-black magic array, covering a 2,000-yard radius, appeared above ancient Rock City. The phantom of a demon king then appeared beneath the magic array, radiating a terrifying aura that every player in ancient Rock City could feel. What a powerful spell! What is that person trying to do? He couldn't really be trying to siege the city, right? This is insane. That person is definitely crazy. This is ancient Rock City we're talking about. What can one player like him possibly do to the city's defensive magic array? Ancient Rock City's players didn't panic in the least as they watched the pitch-black magic array above the city. Rather, they were confused. If this player had used this spell to attack within the city, it would decimate ancient Rock City, but since it was outside of the city's defenses, it couldn't damage the city in the slightest. At most, it would expend some of the defensive magic array's energy. As everyone questioned Shifeng's sanity, the black magic array in the sky completed its formation. At the same time, the Demon King released a furious bellow and summoned numerous flaming meteors, raining them down on ancient Rock City. Tier 5 spell, Hell Meteor. The instant the hill-sized meteors met the city's defensive magic array, a deafening boom echoed throughout the city. As one meteor after another crashed down, cracks began to snake across the magic barrier around ancient Rock City. As the cracks continuously spread, the defensive magic array protecting the city eventually shattered and disappeared. Chapter 1642, Shocking All Sides. Chapter 1642, Shocking All Sides. Chapter 1642, Shocking All Sides. As the players within the city watched the defensive magic array around ancient Rock City transform into particles of light and disappear, their expressions froze. How is this possible? What's going on here? Ancient Rock City's defensive magic array was destroyed. For a time, everyone struggled to process and accept the fact that the defensive magic array had actually broken. Although they were not particularly familiar with the strength of a city's defensive magic array, they knew that normal spells would be utterly useless against it. Even Tier 4 spells would barely have an effect. When Heaven's Burial had tried to capture ancient Rock City, the guild had spent many hours bombarding the city's defensive magic array. It had even employed Tier 4 mythic-ranked evil beasts to assault the barrier. Yet, this same, peerless magic array had crumbled under a single attack. It felt like some kind of joke. What did that person do? Is he some kind of high-tiered NPC? Curiosity filled ancient Rock City's players as they watched Shifeng's cloaked figure. Meanwhile, the eyes of the various players from visiting superpowers within the city glowed as they watched the defensive magic array fall. A chance. This is our change. Quick. Notify the guild leader. Thus far, the superpowers hadn't given up on securing ancient Rock City for themselves. Its daily income was so astronomical that not even super guilds could ignore the temptation. However, nobody had been able to do anything against the city. Its defenses were simply too powerful. Aside from the city's level 100 NPCs, the city's defensive magic array was impossible for these superpowers to overcome. They'd also have to contend with the defensive magic array protecting the City Lord's mansion. Now, however, ancient Rock City's defensive magic array was gone. City's defensive magic arrays weren't like the defensive arrays players could summon with magic array scrolls. Once shattered, the protective barrier would need a long time to reform. Depending on the mana supply, forming another magic array could take anywhere from 24 to 48 hours. During this time, ancient Rock City would be without the protection of a defensive magic array. Aside from the city's defensive structures, the various superpowers only had to overcome the NPCs defending the city. It was entirely possible to steal ancient Rock City out from under Heaven's Burial. The various superpowers members who rested in ancient Rock City immediately contacted their supervisors to report the city's situation. In almost no time, everyone had heard the news of ancient Rock City's defensive magic array shattering, causing quite a commotion among the various major powers in the Orc Empire. What? Someone has broken ancient Rock City's defensive magic array? How did they do it? Hurry up and look into it. We must know that person's identity. This is a good opportunity. Heaven's Burial has been relying on ancient Rock City to suppress us in the Orc Empire. Now that the city has lost its defensive magic array, we definitely have a chance of taking Heaven's Burial's place. Mobilize all of our members in the Orc Empire and tell them to gather in ancient Rock City. Call in all of our elite members grinding elsewhere, too. We can't let the other guilds get ahead of us. For a time, the various superpowers developing in the Orc Empire began to gather their forces in ancient Rock City. 24 hours was more than enough for their forces to make it to ancient Rock City. Without the defensive magic array in their path, they just needed to distract the NPC soldiers and destroy the City Lord's tablet, which was inside the City Lord's mansion. Once that was complete, the city would become ownerless, and a city order would appear. If they could get their hands on that city order, they would claim ancient Rock City for themselves. Meanwhile, silence dominated the guild leader's office in Heaven's Burial's residence. When Singular Burial had initially looked out his office window and noticed the absence of the city's defensive magic array, he had been stunned for a long moment. Once he recovered from the shock, his expression turned somber as he radiated a chilling aura that even decreased the room's temperature. Everyone in the room shuddered as this aura overwhelmed them. Kill him. I don't care who he is. I want him dead. Dead. Singular Burial bellowed as he glared at Shafeng's figure hovering over the city. Ancient Rock City was Heaven's Burial's foundation. The guild had sacrificed too much to obtain it. Now that the city's defensive magic array had fallen, the various superpowers, which had eyed ancient Rock City for a while, wouldn't miss this opportunity. They would launch fervent assaults against the city, and although Singular Burial was confident that his guild could repel these usurpers, Heaven's Burial would suffer immeasurable losses in the upcoming battle. It might even cripple the guild's development. Understood. Finally, everyone reacted and rushed out of the office. At first, they had assumed that they were dealing with some insignificant lunatic, but that lunatic had actually shattered ancient Rock City's defensive magic array and threatened Heaven's Burial's foundation. After Singular Burial issued the command, every NPC in ancient Rock City dashed towards Shafeng, hurling all kinds of ranged attacks. At the same time, the city's defense turrets and arrow towers began to bombard the flying swordsman. But despite such powerful attacks flying at him from different directions, Shafeng didn't try to evade them. Instead, he flew straight towards the City Lord's mansion. With Gale Domain active, Shafeng's movement speed was ridiculously high, and as a result, very few attacks managed to reach him. When an attack did reach him, the streams of dark blue air revolving around Shafeng struck it down before it could deal any real damage. What's that person trying to do? Is he not going to flee? He seems to be heading towards the City Lord's mansion. He couldn't be. When the city's players realized where Shafeng was heading, they considered a possibility. Although they thought that the chance of such an occurrence was minuscule, and the action was utterly suicidal, they couldn't help but shudder at the thought. Sieging the City Lord's mansion, no matter how they thought about it, no single player could achieve this feat. The City Lord's mansion had its own defensive magic array. Only, it didn't require as much energy as the barrier that protected the entire city. Even so, Tier 3 or 4 attacks couldn't easily bring it down. Could he be capable of using that spell again? Everyone gulped in trepidation at the thought. The spell Shifeng had used was absurdly powerful. The fact that he had already used it once was impressive enough. It would simply be unfair if he could use it again. No. He definitely can't use that kind of spell a second time. He must be bluffing. Singular Burial's eyes were bloodshot as he watched Shifeng soar closer to the City Lord's mansion, refusing to believe that such a thing was possible. It wasn't long before Shifeng stopped above the City Lord's mansion. With his lips curing into a smile, he raised the Demon King's horn once more and sacrificed another 30,000 magic crystals to the item. Suddenly, the same gigantic, pitch-black magic array appeared enveloped the City Lord's mansion. A Demon King's phantom then materialized beneath the array. No. This is impossible. Madness struck Singular Burial as he watched the Demon King cast Hell Meteor again. Quick! Kill him. Don't let him finish the spell. At this point, everyone from Heaven's Burial realized the severity of their situation. Without hesitation, they tried to tear Shifeng from the sky with Tier 3 magic scrolls. Some even used Tier 4 magic scrolls, hoping to kill this intruder as quickly as possible. It's too late. Shifeng smiled at the defensive magic array around the City Lord's mansion. Lightly, he swung the Demon King's horn down, gesturing at the mansion. Chapter 1643, Destroying a City Alone. Chapter 1643, Destroying a City Alone. Chapter 1643, Destroying a City Alone. As Shifeng swung down the Demon King's horn from his position above ancient Rock City's City Lord's mansion, the pitch-black magic array looming over the building released a blinding light. In response, hill-sized meteors began to emerge from the array and rain down on the City Lord's mansion. Unlike the previous attack, the players outside of the mansion weren't protected by a magic array. They could clearly feel the heat waves from the blazing meteors. One meteor after another crashed into the defensive magic array protecting the City Lord's mansion, causing the barrier to crack. Although the array had a constant supply of energy, its recovery rate couldn't keep up with the damage it received. As a result, more cracks began to spread across the barrier. No. The defensive magic array around the City Lord's mansion is slightly stronger than the one that protected the city. It's definitely going to endure the attack. Singular Burial silently prayed as he watched the powerful bombardment. The City Lord's mansion was the heart of the city. Hence, the defensive magic array constructed to protect it was even stronger than the one that had protected the city. This was also why he was so confident that ancient Rock City would never fall into the various superpowers' hands. But as hope rekindled in Singular Burial's heart, reality gave him a tight slap to the face. Under Hell Meteor's continuous bombardment, the defensive magic array around the City Lord's mansion eventually collapsed, and the semi-translucent barrier shattered like a mirror. Is this a joke? Who is that guy? He actually destroyed 2 defensive magic arrays in a row. How is this possible? That's the City Lord's mansion's defensive magic array that we're talking about. Even several mythic monsters would need to attack it for a long time to destroy it. What kind of spell did he just use? The crowd in ancient Rock City was stupefied as they watched the spectacle before them. Even Heaven's Burial's members had forgotten to attack the intruder as they stared at the now unprotected City Lord's mansion with dumbfounded expressions. Nobody could believe their eyes. Not even the City Lord's mansion's defensive magic array could stop Shifeng's attack. What these players didn't know was that the attack Shifeng had executed with the Demon King's horn contained a Demon King's full power. The attack ranked at the peak of Tier 5. A normal city's defensive magic array would have no trouble blocking Tier 3 attacks. It could even withstand Tier 4 attacks, which would only exhaust a, albeit considerable, portion of the array's energy reserves. However, the Demon King's horn's attack far exceeded the threshold of any city's defensive magic array. The item could even break through Zero Wing City's defensive magic array, which had a special power source. Once an attack exceeded a defensive magic array's threshold, its energy depletion would increase by multiple times. It wouldn't be unusual if the array stopped functioning entirely. This was also why the various guilds had held massive celebrations whenever they gained a Tier 5 player in Shifeng's previous life. Tier 5 players weren't just capable of defending a city by themselves, they could also shatter an ordinary city's defensive magic array without help, making it far easier for their guild to capture a city. Even after the defensive magic array around the City Lord's mansion fell, Hell Meteor's duration hadn't ended. The brilliant meteors bombarded the mansion itself, and although the building had been reinforced with divine runes, it was no match for the incredible attack. In just a few short seconds, the City Lord's mansion was in shambles. As expected of a Tier 5 peak existence's large-scale destruction spell, its power really is amazing. Shifeng was astonished as he stared at the tattered City Lord's mansion. He had thought that the Demon King's horn would only be able to break through the defensive magic array, but looking at it now, it would seem that he had still underestimated the item's power. Unfortunately, he could only use the Demon King's horn twice. Once the attack ended, the Demon King's horn gradually disintegrated, becoming no more than dust particles before it disappeared. Die. He must die. I want him removed from God's domain entirely. Singular Burial glared at Shifeng with bloodshot eyes. If the man stood before him now, Singular Burial would eat Shifeng alive. Heaven's Burial could have relied on the City Lord's mansion's defensive magic array to withstand the various superpowers assaults, but now that that array had shattered, Ancient Rock City had lost its last line of defense. Now, however, with said magic array shattered, this meant that Ancient Rock City's last line of defense had also disappeared. As Singular Burial barked out commands like a madman, Daybreak Fog and Heaven's Burial's other members worked with the NPC soldiers to eliminate Shifeng. In truth, though, they knew that their actions were futile. Even if they killed Shifeng, Ancient Rock City's 2 defensive magic arrays were gone, and they would need a long time to recover. Meanwhile, facing attacks from all sides, Shifeng unhurriedly retrieved a Tier 3 defensive magic scroll and activated it, blocking every incoming attack. Damn it! Just who the hell is he? What kind of feud does he have with our guild? Find out. Use whatever means it takes to discover that person's identity. Seeing that Shifeng was unfazed despite so many players' attacks, both Heaven's Burial's members and the players from the various superpowers wondered about the man's identity. Even super guilds were helpless against Ancient Rock City, yet Shifeng had destroyed 2 of the city's defensive magic arrays by himself. It was utterly unbelievable, but with the facts before them, they had no choice but to admit it had happened. As players ran off to investigate this flying intruder, Shifeng took the initiative to remove his black cloak, revealing his black flame appearance. Heaven's Burial. Didn't you guys ask for a fight? I'm here. Shifeng shouted as he looked down on Heaven's Burial's members. The moment Shifeng revealed his identity, a moment of silence descended on the city. What? It's Black Flame? Impossible. Black Flame actually came to Ancient Rock City? And he destroyed 2 of the city's defensive magic arrays? Amazing. Truly amazing. The players in Ancient Rock City were thunderstruck when they learned Shifeng's identity. They had never thought that Zero Wing's Black Flame would actually accomplish such an unbelievable feat. Black Flame? His actually Black Flame? How is that possible? Singular Burial was dazed when he saw Shifeng, struggling to think properly. When he had sent the evil demon army after Zero Wing, he had taken into account that the enemy guild might launch some kind of counterattack, but he had never imagined that Zero Wing's guild leader would be so bold as to attack Heaven's Burial's headquarters by himself. Meanwhile, Daybreak Fog, who commanded the battle outside the City Lord's mansion, took a deep breath and ordered, "Kill him. We outnumber him. We cannot let Black Flame enter the City Lord's mansion." The guild's members only reacted and remembered to attack Shifeng after they heard Daybreak Fog's voice ring out. Now that the City Lord's mansion had lost its defensive magic array, there was nothing to protect the City Lord's tablet. If they allowed Shifeng to destroy the tablet and obtain the city order that would then appear, Heaven's Burial would suffer unimaginable consequences. There was no way that Shifeng, who hovered above them all, would emerge unscathed with so many attacks from both players and NPCs. However, Shifeng had no intention of entering the City Lord's mansion. Instead, he swiped his right hand across the empty air before him. In response, a spatial tear appeared in front of him, blocking the incoming attacks. Before every player's eyes in Ancient Rock City, Shifeng entered the spatial tear and vanished. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.